They never know.
He said it was their own.
That's what I like about it.
So yeah, we got a big bad issue there, though. I think the largest back colony in the state.
Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds like fun. So, and then when you
Yeah.
move up the trail, you're coming up, city
16,000
residents. It's called Gateway. So it's up the
name of the reservoir too? Yeah, they have some sound names. They're like, it sounds Joe Smith.
It made me.
Iowa State has to
I can't say, but anyway, it was fun.
First round? Oh, awesome.
Okay, folks, it's 6 o'clock, and we have all the board members here, so we are going to get started for our town board work session this evening for March 18th, 6 p.m. Goal of this work session is to have the town board receive and discuss information on topics of town business from town manager, town attorney, and town staff in order to exchange ideas and opinions regarding these topics. I don't think we have any members of the public, do we? I'm kind of lost because I think they're all.
No, I think they're all on payroll.
Okay. So, 5 items this evening. Our first item is to meet the board, new hire employees, and I guess department heads are going to do that. So we'll start on this end. Do you have any?
Not tonight.
Okay, so who's next?
So let's have maybe Dean go first, and actually, I don't know if you guys know, this is Dean.
His name is Crash.
What department are you in?
I'm not sure yet.
Risk management. Risk management?
I heard you were in rehabilitation.
Parks and rehab?
Physical therapy. Welcome back, good to see everybody. As you all know, our longtime budget analyst, Vicki Miller, retired earlier this month. The new position is filled by Carl Gannon. You can stand up, Carl. Carl comes to us most recently from Brighton, and before that, Fort Collins, where he worked for 10 years. And he started on the 19th, and he keeps coming back, so he's...
Well, Dean hasn't been here. Carl.
You got the two of you back?
So, did you want to say anything, Carl?
No, it's just very neat. It's nice to meet everybody, and I've got big shoes to fill, I know, with Vicky, so I'll do my best.
You do taxes?
Great, welcome aboard.
And then Eric.
So I've got 3 tonight. Steve Moritz, been with us for a month and a half, 2 months now. He's a park operator, comes from the private sector, so.
Cool. Good. You know how to work hard?
Yes, I do. From the bottom to the top.
Good. Good.
Behind you, on my right, your left, Lexi Spikestra. She is our recreation coordinator, special events. The one out there hitting the streets for finding all of our sponsorship money and then running all the events this summer. She worked for us last year as an intern and also a seasonal, so.
And you may remember her dad, Dan,
That's what you
he's our representative, the owner's rep for the Public Works Parks.
Welcome.
It's nice to meet everyone.
And I'm sorry, you said private sector, but from where?
Well, I work for private landscape maintenance companies and construction companies.
Okay.
And so I got a 34-year background in just about everything you can think of.
Good.
From Mrs. Jones's backyard all the way to working for the Urban Drainage Flood Control District and City and County of Denver. A lot of work there, Denver Water Board, a lot of emergency and disaster experience.
Well, good. You may need that.
Everything from tornadoes to molasses spills.
Oh.
And Lexi, where were you?
So, I just graduated actually, so this is my first full-time job. but I'm
From
really
college,
excited.
right?
Yes.
Thanks for putting it out there for everybody.
Born and raised in Windsor, so I'm excited to start my career here as well. And for those of you who knew Luke, I literally have some big shoes to fill, so I'm excited.
And last but not least, behind beside Lexi is Christy Zulkowski. She was with us as a part-time year-round administrative specialist. She's now full-time. So she's been with us for 1 year. The only fault that I know of hers is she's a Bronco fan.
And she married well, obviously, I think with the, what was the last name?
Solkowski.
Ski?
Yep.
Was that a ski?
Yeah, I went from Hpc to Solkowski. I thought it could be Smith or Jones, but I wasn't that lucky.
Pierogi Day at Town Hall. Pierogi Day.
I'm glad the two of you feel qualified.
I have the triple threat, blonde, left-handed, and Polish for the rest of my life. So I wish there was like a college scholarship around there. I don't know. It's been rough, a lot of people. But I'm originally from Colorado Springs. Kind of made my way up. Was actually educator, teacher was in my background, so I've taught for about 9 years. 3rd and 5th grade, and then special ed. Did some sales and some grammar and writing in education, so kind of traveled around Colorado, Wyoming, Utah. Went to UNC, had my master's in education, and just found a new home and a new, hopefully, career with the town. Very pleased with the change and the people I work with, and excited. So I've been here almost a year in April, so.
And that's everybody. So we're gonna try to do, we'll have a little bit of catch up. We're gonna just go back to the start of the year and try to catch people up. And then this will likely just be once a month after we get caught up. But we just figured do, 3 or 4 at a time. So the board is like, oh my God, how many people have we hired? So we're trying to ease you into it.
Okay. Did the board need to make their introductions, or is everybody, maybe we should just make sure?
I'm Barry Wilson, I represent District 2 on the west side of town.
I'm Ken Bennett, represent District 3, which is mostly the north side of Main Street to the Lower County line.
And acting mayor pro tem.
And acting mayor pro tem.
I'm Miles Baker, I represent District 1, which is the far west side up by the highway.
Tom Jones, District 5, which is mainly Old Town, Windsor.
Christy Melendez, mayor's serving, ending my 9th year, moving into my 10th year of service here next month.
Representing all.
Representing us.
David Soslowski, board member from District 6, which is essentially Water Valley.
Paul Rennemeyer, District 4. I'm like Dr. Jones in an older part of town. I have 7th Street to 11th Street, Main down to New Liberty, basically along triangle. So, with some caveats that split off a little bit. But
You do have.
I digress.
Of the gerrymandering
I digress.
required us.
And other places have noted. So.
Okay. So we'll move on to our second item, which is advisory board review, which Mayor Pro Tem Bennett and I, after kind of looking at how the town is growing, thought it would be appropriate to really take a look at the boards, how they're currently situated, see if there is a chance or opportunity to perhaps think about making some changes at this time, or implementing anything new. So who was gonna?
Well, I think Scott's front of the PowerPoint, we just have these kind of ordered mayors, so we're
Okay.
gonna just go kind of board by board.
Okay.
Yeah, the planning department works with 4 different boards, the planning commission, board of adjustment, historic preservation, and Windsor Housing Authority. So the first 2, as you read in your memo, are statutory boards, planning commission and board of adjustment, and are required by the town's charter as well. So the information that and you're pretty well aware of what the planning commission is up to, because most of it comes through your agendas as well. So we've got up first from the planning department is the Historic Preservation Commission, and Paul Hornbeck is our staff liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission. I can run the slides if you want.
So good evening, everyone. As Scott alluded to, the HPC, or Historic Preservation Commission, is kind of overseen by both the state and the municipal code. So Windsor is a certified local government, or CLG, which is a designation administered by the state, but it's also a national program. So we have certain criteria we have to follow. The National Park Service describes the CLG as follows. They are counties or municipalities that have been endorsed by the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service to participate in the National Preservation Program while maintaining standards consistent with the National Historic Preservation Act and the Secretary of the Interior's Standards for Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So as a CLG, there's both benefits as well as some responsibilities. Some of those benefits are access to different grants or funds through the state, technical support from the state or federal government, and property owners are able to receive a 30% tax credit when they do renovations that are consistent with the national standards. Some of the responsibilities we have to follow is enacting the historic ordinance as well as overseeing the Historic Preservation Commission, which is required to meet 4 times annually. The commission members are required to attend at least 1 annual training, and we maintain a survey and inventory of historic properties. And a lot of the surveys and inventories are on the town's HPC website, if you have an interest in seeing those. There are, another responsibility is the properties and districts which are considered for historic designation. They would be designated by the town board through ordinance based on a recommendation from the HPC. We don't currently have any historic districts. We do have a handful of properties that are listed. Properties or districts may be designated based on architectural, social, or geographic or environmental significance. Any alterations to those designated properties require approval by the HPC, and those approval criteria are based on what's listed in the municipal code, as well as the Secretary of Interior standards maintained by the Park Service. The town has 7 sites or properties designated currently. We're standing in one. The old town hall, which is now the Art and Heritage Center, is also one. And then some of the buildings in Boardwalk Park and First United Methodist Church, as well as the archaeological site, the Kaplan Hoover site.
And are they just locally designated? Or are they
Some are local, some are national, so
okay.
the Kaplan Hoover site, the church, and the Old Town Hall are all the national sites. And the national sites come with more recognition, but there's actually less regulation associated with those. There's more teeth to the local ordinances or local designation. The HPC also oversees educational and outreach materials, such as the walking tours that are on the website. And recently we had the presentation at the Art and Heritage Center, and that was also repeated in a work session in last month on the Walnut Street homes. So that's summary of HPC. Any other questions?
How does that 30% tax credit work? I mean, what tax are we crediting?
I'm actually not very familiar with it. I've never, since I've been here, I haven't seen one come through. Since it's only these 6, 7 properties, they're typically more a private homeowner wants to renovate. They're a lot more common in those instances. But
is it a property tax credit or is it a?
Yeah, I believe it's a state property tax.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's if one of the listed properties wanted to make an alteration.
Right.
Yeah.
Does the museum or Caitlin ever get involved in helping the historic?
Yeah, Caitlin's been a great resource last few years since I've been involved in the HPC. She has a lot of those archives and records and things.
I had 2 questions, and Dr. Jones asked the first one. Sometimes it'd be nice to have an example of how that tax credit works.
Sure.
If, not a lot of research on the whole, but if we ever have an example of how that might work on a private residence or how it might work on a commercial building.
Sure.
The other question I have is restrictions. I'm gonna make up a wild example. Someone owns an older home and they decide, for whatever reasons, they're willing to, and it's on the registry, they wanna sell it, and maybe the property is demolished and turned into something else, is that possible? Or once you have a designation, I guess my question is, what's the extent of modifications that can be made to a property once it's identified?
So you can make renovations, there's pretty detailed criteria in the municipal code and in the park service standards that I referenced that talk about how those modifications should be made. You can put an addition on. For an addition, you're not supposed to try and copy the old style. You want it to kind of fit, but not to be able to tell the differences. You know, if you're putting new windows in, things like that, you can do that following the standards. The demolition, I'm not as familiar with.
That'd be pretty radical, I know,
But I think,
just curious.
I think your
about what
risk
the
is just
limitations
losing
are.
the designation.
Right.
So
Right.
in the end, it's never, if you're on the register, your risk is losing that designation.
So you could lose it.
You could lose your
I think
designation.
our good example is the mill.
The mill,
Mhm.
right.
It was on the
Once it was
National
destroyed,
Historic
it was-
Registration site. It no
Right.
longer is going to be,
Right.
because they had to basically,
Disaster.
you know,
Right.
demolish it
Yeah.
and
Okay.
So
build it back
if
from
you've
ground
got
up.
grants or tax credits or other things you put into that, maybe you're gonna have a funder say, no, you can't do that.
Mhm.
But from
Okay.
the town, or you have to pay it back, maybe, but, from the town standpoint, and then even if they come through and say, I'm on the local register and I wanna do X, Y, and Z, we may look at it and say, look, this would make this building non-contributing. If you did this, if you changed the facade, if you did these radical changes to your house, you can do them. We're not gonna not process that permit. It's just gonna be that you're probably kicked off our local historic
Okay.
register.
Okay.
This group, at least previously, does not always meet every month. I mean, they went for like a series of months, not necessarily even meeting, correct? So,
Absolutely.
so what dictates like when they meet? Is it just when like maybe CSU makes that call to say, hey, we wanna do this study? When a homeowner calls to inquire something about, but when does this commission decide to meet?
Previously it was kind of as needed, and whenever we had, special projects we were working on. We've gone away from that. We'll still hold a special meeting if needed, but we've got regular quarterly meetings just to make sure we get those four that were required by the state.
So one thing that, and I know we're gonna talk in big broad terms, but one thing that I would think about is, since this board, it does not meet on a real regular basis, but one of the key things that it does is maintain our artifacts and everything, which is already being done by the folks who run Art and Heritage Center, which all of that is under the preview right now of Parks and Rec and Culture Board. Isn't that's part of the Culture Board? That maybe this, as we look to see like how we might modify or change, rather than this maybe be a standalone, I wonder if this could be something, I don't know, under the umbrella
Under
of
pre-cap.
pre-cap. Yeah,
Again,
because then it's, and then it could just, whenever, quarterly, they could put into their agenda whatever items they need to address to meet state standards or whatever comes up, because it doesn't seem like we have anything really on an ongoing basis. Because initially I thought there might be a way to merge this group with the Windsor Severance Historic Society, but I see here you have to have a municipality or government designee to be able to have this designation.
I think that's part of the certified local government.
Yeah, so I don't think we'd wanna maybe lose that. I don't know what,
I had that question too, because I saw
advantages
that
we
there's a
have.
legal requirement there that, but I think there is an opportunity maybe, to look at, I don't know if it's consolidating or, my concept is left hand and right hand working together. If different groups have similar agendas, if they are combined somehow or working together somehow, some way they might be more bang for the buck.
yeah, I mean, it just seems almost, a waste of everybody's time to position, I don't know how many are on that board, 5 or 7,
Yeah.
to appoint them every time, and then they end up meeting twice a year, or what are they really accomplishing?
They meet 4 times.
Or 4 times, but what are they really accomplishing? And I think maybe even if we put them, I think there still should be a way that this group or segment, however they're designated or redesignated. I think that should work more closely with the Windsor Historical Society too, because a lot of those folks, at least right now, are preserving a lot of this history or know this history and can help as you know, along as you guys are also documenting history too. So, or maybe there is a person from that board that it is representative that for those meetings specifically or something of that nature. They're gonna be doing a lot more outreach here in the next 30 to 60 days to try to bolster their membership as well. So I don't know if there's just a way for all those pieces to work together.
Was there a joint meeting with them?
Yeah, we did have.
We had a presentation from,
We did.
the Historic Society.
Okay. Was there, I was thinking maybe at that, I didn't attend that particular meeting, I wasn't sure if there were ideas brought up at that meeting regarding joining forces or joint projects at all?
It was, each group kind of shared what they did, but there wasn't necessarily talk of joining forces or anything.
But they definitely should be on each other's radar because, you know, I think there's things that each other could glean from what, you know, I mean, or this board certainly needs to know what their next project is and working on, because I think one of the projects they intend to work on next is the old National Bank building downtown, which is now, because there's a lot of history behind that building originally. So that's the next video or Q&A that they're gonna do. So I think both sides should at least, maybe they don't necessarily always have to be at each other's meetings, but there should be some communication where if this is still a standing board, they know what that board's working on. So if they have anything to share or add or say, oh, hey, we already just did that, or, I mean, there's no sense people, you know, duplicating efforts.
Well, couldn't you make that a requirement in the ordinance that, how many on that board? 5 or?
5 and 2 alternates.
5 and 2 alternates? That 1 or 2 have to be members of the Historical Society? I mean, that way you lock it in, but they'll definitely be represented.
Yeah, we do that too.
And one project they're working on is they've actually done mock-ups of the water, the history of water and the importance to Windsor. They want to put a couple displays along the lake. They don't have budget for that, but I told them if they bring up a good idea that I would bring it to the board. So they're still working on that. So they have people that are a pretty diverse group of people that have worked in designing these and actually installing them. An architecture firm, I think. One woman
Contractor,
yeah, so
Yeah,
pretty.
a couple of our new members have specific backgrounds that are in historic preservation or related fields, so we do have a fairly strong board right now.
Caitlin already designed what it would look like and all the pictures and words.
But see, that's one thing too, that I don't know if that all of that has been presented to the Windsor Historical Board, because they did a lot of water research when they had the statue commissioned, because they had to go to the Poudre River Heritage Alliance to get a grant, and part of that grant, they had to be able to demonstrate things about the Poudre River and some knowledge and information. So I don't know if they have any, I mean, there might be things that they could glean or use and vice versa, because that's part of what they wanted that to demonstrate, right, is the importance of water to Windsor, which is, again, what I think what they want to accomplish next is to show that too in all these different signatures, so.
So maybe we should look at, what, is the Historic Society a 501c3, or
Yes.
is that that's their makeup, so they probably have a required board makeup as well, but.
They do, they just revamped their charter, but.
Okay. So maybe a comparison of their charter and our mission, I guess, and I don't know, what kind of, we can bring back what we find and see if the board wants to make any changes, or.
How often is the Historical
They
Society?
meet every
meeting?
month.
Monthly?
They meet every month, the fourth Monday of every month. Soon to move to Bethel. Or next month, they'll be moving to Bethel from their other location. But
Just for info, the tax credit is 20% of the qualified expenses of refurbishing, and it's a direct tax credit against income tax for the state.
against your income tax,
above the line.
not property tax.
Right.
I think there,
Income tax.
there might be another program.
You said 20, it's 30,
I'm sorry?
30%.
20. Qualifying expenses, so you gotta show them what you did, what it cost.
This says 30 there.
This says 30, no.
Well, according to the Preservation Tax Credit fact sheet for the History Colorado website,
Okay.
it says 20. You can stack it with a 10 to 20% federal.
Okay, that's what we need to.
And just,
So I just wonder if there's opportunities where we're missing something.
and just a clarification too, in the pre-cab board was mentioned earlier, just for a historical perspective, I think about 15 or 16 years ago, the HPC was under the Parks Department, and it was at that point in time that the town applied for and became a certified local government, and then it was moved under planning for whatever reason at that time, I can't recall. So,
Maybe they thought a lot more was gonna happen with this
could be,
grant tax credit money somehow or some way.
right?
I mean, I'm not opposed to it staying there, but, you know, it's never good to have a board just to have a board,
Right.
unless there's some real purpose or active intention.
Sure.
And I mean, I think there are some good things here to preserve, but maybe not necessarily tie up everybody's time and energy if it seems like it's kind of moved to a much more part-time
But
something.
they're required to meet, so whether it's under pre-cab or.
Right, wherever it is.
Right. And they have to meet 4 times a year?
Mhm.
Right. And the members have to attend training each year as well.
All
So
of the
that's-
members?
I believe it's at least
At least
one.
one.
At least
Or just
one.
one? Okay.
So what we've typically done is sent at least 1 or 2 board members and a staff person to the Saving Places Conference in Denver each year, so.
Part of my reason for asking about the credit was, I was thinking about homeowner, but I was also thinking about downtown businesses.
Yeah. Storefronts.
Right, storefronts, it ties in, if there's an opportunity that maybe some businesses are missing, if the building was designated and they did some facade or improvement, maybe there's another way of having some assistance with that, so just wondering.
Yeah, we can look into that more and report back.
Could they stack up both?
They may not want it.
They have to
right,
use
because
one or the other,
of
probably, because
limitations.
the
What I'm saying, they can't.
the DDA has its own facade
Right,
plan, but
alright,
so they
We'd have
can't
to, we'd
use.
have to look at that, but
Okay.
what I'm just looking at says that they can't use both credits.
you can't do it.
And I'm also like Mr. Sislowski was looking this up, so I have slightly different information. So it says 20% federal tax credit for rehab of certified historic buildings, 20% state tax credit for rehab of historic owner-occupied residences, and then it says a 20 to 30% state tax credit for the rehab of historic buildings used for income-producing purposes. So
As a
if it's,
commercial property.
if it's commercial, they can get up to 30%. Anyway, sorry. that's-
No, what I was reading was for residential.
Right, yeah, it was.
I sent you the link to the, and he could send you the link.
Yeah, we just haven't had a lot of interest for anybody to take us up.
Right, no,
And does the state charter dictate how many have to actually sit on that board? Or did we just kind of come up with our number
No,
because we
it's-
called
I
it
think it's
advisory?
just-
5.
It is
For the
5.
state, yeah.
Because I'm wondering if instead of, I mean, it being quote unquote an advisory board, but to keep our status, we just plan on having whoever we have to have in place, and we meet 4 times a year, and, but, you know, and unless there's some request to do something, I don't know, then other than that, maybe that's, unless there's other reasons why they should be looking at doing something, you know, I don't know.
They've also talked about putting signs or plaques in front of some of the historic buildings. Again, they don't have budgets, so these are just conceptual.
There's something, and I do think if we have a local historic property, the town should provide the plaques for that. I mean, you know, because that's pretty easy to do, that's a low budget item.
Mhm.
It may be a way to incentivize as we continue to do these reviews in neighborhoods and find more properties that are eligible and contributing, maybe a little incentive, you know, to get a little walking tour downtown.
The Kaplan site's marked tonight with a nice rock with a plaque on it.
I will say during the first 2 years I was on the board, I was on the HPC and they didn't meet except if there was an agenda item, which is where you're getting that, but I will give credit to Mr. Paul that as soon as he took over the HPC, it's met, well, we met like 3 months in a row and then it went to quarterly once we were back on track. And of course, Carrie Ann Lucas was the chair and, you know, so it's, you know, now Miles has had it almost a year, so it sounds like they're accomplishing quite a bit. I mean, I know that they were talking a year ago about the plaques around the lake and the walking tour and stuff, so.
They're definitely interested, I think if we have ideas
Yeah.
to get them engaged, I know they'd be.
Well, that's why I'm just wondering if those are folks who are interested in history.
Yeah.
You have the Windsor Historical Society who needs more people to be able to help that. Is there a way to, otherwise that group eventually is gonna
Yeah.
fall apart. Is there not a way to mesh both of those somehow together to preserve all of those elements that we want, right?
Well, we have these legal requirements though,
Right.
so it's kind of hard.
You're
for
right,
us
so
to-
so it can't
we can-
really become, yeah, we have to keep this designation, I think,
It's like they need to come into
or
Or
something.
have some joint members.
joint members.
Yeah.
Yeah, or have some
Corresponding
representation
board.
on each other's
Right,
boards so that
right.
everybody's
So there's
aware of what each
communication,
other's
They
doing.
do some projects together, yeah.
Well, the board liaison could serve on both, couldn't they, or attend both? I'm not trying to sign Miles up for that. I'm just
Or
saying.
we can even reach out to them and just seeing if both boards want to do an ex officio, just see if we can just send, again, even if it's a non-voting
Yeah.
member to these
Yeah.
meetings, I think it's just somebody that lists what's going on and find
Right.
some.
I mean, there's usually been a town representative. I mean, Eric's been to many of the meetings, or it's Caitlin or Laura have come on a regular basis. But I don't know that they know that they haven't been told that they're supposed to, you know, if we have those kinds of things, then everybody needs to know that her job, part of why she attends is to maybe report back to whoever she's reporting to, her board or whatever, so that we can identify when there's synergies or ways that we can all work together or on things, instead of everybody trying to do their own independent, whatever. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, I mean, I think we have, to me, I just heard a couple things we need to follow through with the board on, and at least do a little bit more research and follow.
Alright. Next up, we have Windsor Housing Authority, and Carlin has been the planning department, or town liaison to the Housing Authority for the last several years. So she's overseen, she's also overseen the site plans for the latest projects that they've been working on, so. with that one.
Right, and also, mention that Ken used to be the liaison, for several years, and now, Mr. Jones.
Dr. Jones.
I presume.
Dr. Jones, I presume.
Town is full.
All right, so there's a little bit more information in your packets, but, basic overview, the Housing Authority was established in 1974. And in 78, the first project came about, that's the Century 3 apartments, which are located further west here on Walnut. I also want to mention, so the Housing Authority obviously is, our partner is Loveland Housing Authority, and they also partnered with Estes Park for a while. Estes Park branched out and they have their own housing authority now. They also oversee Milliken. They have a number of different projects and they're just a wealth of knowledge, so we're really lucky that we're partnering with them. In 2004, the town adopted a workforce housing policy, and in 2008, the town initiated a housing needs study. Or I'm sorry, that's when it, right, it was initiated the study in 2012 was when the town's housing strategic plan was adopted. And in 2010, the bylaws were adopted. So some of the benefits, access to state and federal grants, so that includes the private activity bonds that the town has allocated to the Windsor Housing Authority in 2018 and also 2016, once the town became eligible for those bonds, which was 3 years ago. And the Housing Authority has used those bonds to complete the Windsor Meadows apartments up on top here, and they're also using it towards their new senior housing project. One of the other benefits, they're able to get loans, whether that's through CHAFA, the state, or through HUD. And there's other financial mechanisms that they can also take advantage of, either through state or through HUD.
And they've used those for a lot of renovations at Century 3 lately too, I think.
Correct. They also use the HUD standards for income qualifications. And their responsibility, they have one annual meeting, but they have regular monthly meetings. There are 5 members, and they oversee quite a few things. The financial and operational decision-making on all of their projects. They oversee their grants, loans, just a long list of items that they have responsibility for. And then they also, they oversee all the new opportunities. So they have the 2 housing projects that exist now, as well as this one located in Windshire. You've already seen some concept plans for this. They do own this land, and they were able to use some of the private activity funds that the town allocated for this project.
Where are they at with that project? Can I interrupt?
I just got an email actually Friday that said right now it's on hold. They're working through, it sounds like it's engineering related, that engineers are really backlogged right now with a lot of work. So they're working on final subdivision and final site plan.
Okay.
But they did just have their neighborhood meeting not too long ago, didn't they? And the neighbors are supportive of the new project, so.
Good.
I think they are talking to architects as well. I haven't
That's true.
signed any contracts, but they're out there seeing who's available.
Any,
So, yeah, that concludes what I have. That's just a brief overview.
And in recent conversations, this board is actually looking to perhaps merge with Severance and create a Windsor Severance board. So we actually will be, that's not too long, that's the
Right.
April
So, yeah.
9th.
Yeah, April 9th, talking to the Severance Town Board, and, yeah, so that conversation goes.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is this a nonprofit? Is it profit? Like, what is our, do we have any authority over this group?
Well, we do have some resolutions that were passed by the board regarding the workforce housing, and that basically gives them direction on how those properties will be managed, who will qualify, who those residents can be.
Do they have to follow that? What if they didn't want to do that? Could they do more workforce housing?
Well, for example, the workforce housing that exists, the Windsor Meadows apartments, there are income standards that they need to meet, and those are set by HUD.
But they don't take direction from the town, like you will do.
We appoint the members, but that's it.
That's it.
Right, and then there's obviously the workforce housing ordinance.
Right.
But I think their action has shown that they do take direction,
Yeah, no,
because
I don't.
they
curious.
implemented workforce as that came out of this town board's
Right.
direction. When was that? Like, gosh, we were the first on it.
2012.
And then we told them, when they completed that project, that the next project we wanted them to do, or to look at, was senior housing. So I think they do heed our, I guess, our advice, or, you know, our suggestions that we would make to them, but that wouldn't preclude them if they had, I guess, their own idea, or, you know, to do something too. Just like, I think the one thing that shows their own initiative that they're driving towards right now is trying to obtain Governor's Farm, or, no, Windsor Governor, Governor's Farm,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's something we didn't tell them, I mean, but that's something that they
Be
saw that
proactive.
opportunity, and I think they brought that to us, so I think that they understand what our goals are, and, you know, what we wanna achieve, and they try to align with those as much
But
as
with
they can,
virtually no financial involvement from us, from the
Right.
town.
right now.
Yeah.
Well,
You know, some communities take this on themselves, and I would not be in favor of that. The logistics of it, the management of it, the staff you need is, I think, is overwhelming. And so I think it's really smart of us to try to encourage them to become self-sustaining. I think we probably need to help them do that. And this opportunity, good opportunity with severance, if that comes about, it could give them to self-sustainability sooner. And again, I would not be in favor of us taking on the management of it. I think it's, we're very fortunate to have had these volunteers doing all this and loving and helping and doing that for our community, without us having to manage it and fund it and so forth. So if we can help them take the next step, I think it'll really help the community for the next decade.
What does it do for severance?
They said
Gives-
that they have interest in senior housing.
Gives them the ability to
Meaning
build
the next
senior
project.
housing. Could be, yeah. Could be, I mean, whatever, if
Right.
Severance had a interest in the parties and,
I'm just trying to think of their side of it
I
going,
was too.
what's,
Yeah, I've done it too.
they want a project out there.
Right, and I think our discussions, at least among the handful that were at the meeting, is if a project goes in severance, that's great. If our residents are eligible for that, and it's a senior housing project, and it benefits both communities, you know, why would we care about some imaginary line where the building gets constructed?
Yeah.
Especially if severance is, if they're, they have property available, it's less expensive, but they have other things that aren't in place here. You know, the whole community wins, and so if severance sees a win, we see the win, and we, neither taxing entity has to put all the resources into it, if we can kind of share that burden, there could be a good win for everybody.
Yeah, I think the sharing the burden, and, you know, we don't have to get to 350 units, and they don't have to get to 350 units, we can put it together.
And from their standpoint, because the housing authority already has such a great jump, they're not going from 0 to 350. I think they could get on with a housing authority that's already done a lot of great projects, and they get there a lot quicker.
what seems natural, we share other districts between us already, school board, you know, school district, library district, fire district, so I don't think it's a far stretch. And there are, we're looking at some IGAs already in place where there's communities that do this, so.
One of the things the housing authority, you know, they have firsthand knowledge of, you know, who actually needs the affordable housing, and so, for example, the Windshire, project that they oversee, their waiting list is primarily seniors, because they've run out of workforce. So they know that that's the highest demand, and so they've taken the next step and, have proposed what you see here.
Well, I also liked how they did the designs where it was senior friendly, and they did a lot of forethought into how they built these units.
Yeah, and I think they took a lot into account about the streetscape and what people would see. So it's a smart design.
Energy efficiency made a big difference too in their overhead.
Next is Water and Sewer Board. I just put up here the sections of code that defines the functions and duties of the Water and Sewer Board. Something that a lot of people forget is it also includes storm drainage because of the title is Water and Sewer Board, but it does include drainage. And as far as their meetings, for many, many years, they met once a month. And then, I think it was about 5 years ago, they decided to go to every other month, every even-numbered month. And just recently, they've met monthly. They seem to have quite a few things to do, and they seem to be motivated, so we're right now back in every month. But if we don't have something to put on the agenda, we do not meet. Just put the members, current members up there. Several of them are pretty new, like Janine Willie, Milton Geiger, Takanaga. They're fairly new. None of them are up there a long time, like 10 years or more. So it's a fairly new board. It's changed quite a bit in the last few years, personality-wise.
Could you go back to next slide back, please? This is felt a little bit awkward. By our ordinance, they are to advise us on all matters. You can read that. It feels kind of awkward because we have to sit and make decisions on this. And recently, no one's fault, but it was almost like an afterthought. We go to the board and say, we look at raising rates and do these kind of things. So I'm trying to figure out how to effectively use the Water and Sewer Board without setting them up, because they're really good, dedicated people. And from what I've seen the last few months I've been with them, in their mind, they really take this seriously. They feel responsible to give us advice on what we should be doing. It feels awkward to the timing and the flow of information, and so I'm questioning what really their role is. If that made any sense to you?
I think it makes perfect sense. When Dr. Jones and I were interviewing for that, for a couple of open positions, and we were looking at the people interviewing, and it's kind of like you recognize this board is having an inward-facing function, which would be to kind of talk to the board, and yet it's a highly technical area.
Yeah.
That we're probably gonna rely on John and Dennis.
And we have more staff now.
But they also have an external-facing function, to my mind, which is, given a certain policy or a certain direction, help communicate it to the citizens and use them as a community outreach tool. And I see that function as probably more appropriate.
I do too, and there's examples of where they've been doing that the last few months, really helped us on some things. But for them to advise us up front seems kind of weird because it is so technical. So I'm not sure how to play that out.
Yeah, I think the time probably has come to maybe think about changing that. I think back in the day, they had folks who'd been on the board for 30 years, and some of those folks knew as much as, been around as long as Dennis had and knew much of that history. I'm just telling you that he's very knowledgeable, nothing more than that, Dennis. But,
We got that.
but like now we've got new folks who are who are interested in that conversation, which is good, but don't necessarily have the background or the expertise and that's something I kind of see throughout that I think we need to change, because we have the Planning Commission and you have the Board of Adjustments. Those are dictated, right? And so Planning Commission, that makes sense. But then we have Historic Preservation is called a commission, Windsor Housing is called an authority, Water and Sewer is a board, Parks and Rec is a board, and Tree is a board. So I think maybe we also have to help define what do we want from these organizations, and then what should they be? Are they really boards? Are they authority, you know, what
Yeah.
are they? I don't know.
Yeah, what the
But I think
water-
part of that is how we describe what they are will also help us better position them.
And I do see a role for water and sewer board, that people on there are very knowledgeable, they're extremely serious about water, okay? In our community, they're really, really good. I don't like to set people up though, and make them think that they are gonna be advising us when maybe they really aren't, because there's some decisions maybe we have to make. But at the same time, it's wise for us to have a group of citizens that we can bounce things off of. So I'm just trying to figure out how to balance all that.
Right. And
I don't have an answer yet, but.
The way that David talked about it, you know, really the external functions versus inward.
Yeah.
Because he's right, I mean, I think when we first started out with the water and sewer board, there really were our technicians that really did come in with that. And now we have the technical staff. You know, you question like when we take a tour of RO plants and we don't have the water and sewer board with us to do that.
Yeah.
It just feels like, yeah,
Yeah.
again, how can we use these people who were dedicated, who volunteered their time?
Why don't we have them on the tour?
Well, my belief is because they had been a little bit more inactive, and then kind of to start the year, we've got some new blood in there, some people who kind of reactivated with a little bit more vigor. And again, it was, I would say probably on staff too, just not even thinking about them. You know, it was a lot more of a technical tour, and it just wasn't our first.
I'd like to hear their thoughts on RO or any of these things that we're discussing on water.
When I was
Well,
first
but-
elect-
But they're not technical, but neither are we, so.
Yeah.
But when I was first elected, I went to the meeting and, they hadn't had a meeting for a long time, the minutes weren't posted for like over a year. Then when they did have a meeting and I came back, cause I went to the meeting and like nobody was there, it was canceled and I didn't know it. And, there's nothing like on the website and things like that. And then when I did go, there were people who hadn't, on the roster who hadn't showed up for a year. So at the time, I wasn't on the board and I wasn't assigned to anything yet. And, but I had those questions, I said, well, if people aren't showing up, shouldn't we bring in some new blood? And so I know a couple of those people, I was on the interview team and brought them in, and they're very passionate, but I always kind of wondered, you know, the planning commission and other groups that do advise us on things, you know, I don't see, I know they're doing stuff, but I'm not seeing the stuff come in front of us. Maybe it should be, I don't know. That's where I don't have the right answers here. I mean, David, going back to what you said, maybe we could put their focus on something more like that.
On the external, if we keep it as an internal advisory, or at least someone off whom we bounce some high-level policy, finance and governance decisions, then we better educate them. I mean, then we really need to put different people on that board, or educate them and get them.
And Dennis and John have been doing a really great job with that. The meetings, you know, the same presentations we're getting, they're getting.
But those board, terms are 2 years?
Right, you don't wanna.
And there's, and water, as you know, going through water at leaders class, or just the conversations we have to have about water, water is so complicated. That's, I mean, I think that if you've got a group and they're interested, yes, we need to fulfill a role, but I'm not sure how much advisory position they can play, because they have a higher turnover, and just that level, I mean, I think that's why we have invested in our own town resources, because it's such a complicated, important subject that you have to have folks who really know,
Yeah.
to kind of help lead that conversation, so I don't know what.
Or is it a reclassification that it is an advisory board? You know, I mean, I know that we talk about advise the town board on all matters, but then maybe it's not as official in nature, maybe it is an advisory, so things do things have to go before the water and sewer board down the line? You know, or is it something that we can take up?
But I'm even leery of using the word advisory, because some folks take that word to mean that then they are to advise us on anything and everything. So I don't know if there's other, I've tried to see if there's what other communities use or call these groups.
Why can't they advise us though? If we have staff, you know, training them like they train us. If they're getting presentations now.
Well, Christie's exactly right. When this was set up way back in, I think, the early '80s, I mean, you had Wayne Miller, who was, he worked for Kodak and advised them on water rights. You had Kent Bruner, who was a farmer. You had ditch board members sitting on it. And at the time, they knew everything that was going on.
Right.
And the rest of the board was pretty clueless, and we took their advice. But now it's, now it's changed quite a bit, and we've got a lot of staff that's doing all the things these guys did from just their backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I'd hate to see it abolished, I mean, but I think maybe Dave's on the right track. They could be an educational tool for the community.
And then again, though, how do we control that, though? Because again, even within our own selves, we are constantly putting out messaging to make sure that when we're talking about things, we're all on the same page. And yet, when you look at, the minute you look at next door, somebody completely gets it wrong and starts leading everybody else down the wrong path. And then if you have, and it's bad enough to try to get 7 of us to make sure we're talking the same message, then you add another 5 or another 7, how do you control that? And so, well, I think that there's great, these, I don't know, maybe these folks become another extension of, I don't know, because I think there's other things that we are important in our community now that we have thought about adding to that. I don't know if this becomes an extension of that. And I know like even one person in particular when I interviewed, there's at least 2 people on there who didn't really care if it was the water board or not, but they were looking to be on a board. So I think they would be happy to serve in whatever capacity we wanted them.
One of the things we did in the school district many years ago was we created a couple groups of, I think we call them key communicators. So, because there is a value for us to bounce ideas off of the public, because maybe sometimes the way we're explaining things doesn't make sense maybe with us internally or with staff, but you try to explain it to a citizen and it comes out a little differently. So I think there's and I've already seen the Water and Sewer Board has done some things to help communicate our need for water already. So maybe, playing off your idea, Christy, of changing maybe they're a key communicator group that we can bounce ideas off of. We can share with them why we're making the decisions we're making. Just a thought.
Scott, if you go forward 2 slides, I think, it shows what they've been doing. And if you look at that, for instance, the very first bullet, water rate study, how to finance NISP. Oh, come on. You and I don't know how to finance NISP. And so what is this? We're gonna send this group
We're
up to
sharing
look
information with
into
them,
public
right.
activity
Right.
bonds or taxes and financing to
Right.
figure out.
Well, I think that they have the same presentation from Stantec.
Yeah.
So they were basically, it was just another board, we had the presentation, you could ask questions and.
So, but to what end? Because it's time. It's taking a lot of your time to do that. And if you're
staff
thinking
time.
to try to educate that group, to get them up to speed on, to be like mini John Thornhills, that's gonna be a huge effort. And for what, to what end?
A 2-year term.
Well, it's a
I
4-year,
can-
Kim just found it.
Well, there was a value in that, because they walked out of these, they're meeting every month now, which they weren't even meeting before, they're meeting every month now. They walked out there nodding their heads saying, we understand why you're raising the rates. So they have a group of citizens that can go out, whether they talk to their neighbor or not, I don't know. But to have a group of people who know some things about water and to say, we understand why you're doing this, I think there's a value to that.
And there also are future town board members from water or planning or any of these boards, so I think educating them and teaching them and accepting their input.
But why make everybody jump through all these hoops 2 different times? If you've got folks like that who wanna sit around the table and are interested in water, when we have our water work session, like when, they should be invited to that instead of their own special meeting, I think, for some efficiency here. And so we're all hearing the same thing at the same time and hearing whatever same questions are coming in.
Hearing our conversation too.
Yeah, maybe not, this duplication of efforts, again, and to what end? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think in the 9 years that I've been here and that we've had that board, what something have they ever brought before the board that we stopped and said, oh, we didn't think about that, or oh, thanks for sharing, or oh, that was something new, and I can't think of one thing. So again, just going back to, I'm not saying, you know, I don't know, but if it's a group of folks who have that interest, why can't they just, if every time we have our water conversation, say, here's, you know, they're earmarked to attend whatever we're having, as long as they're not executive sessions. And then how do we utilize that, or what they do with that, I don't know.
If you want, and you should get citizen input and feedback on all of these, and these are huge policy decisions, and that's a good avenue for it. So if you're looking to them as a resident and as a citizen and saying, hey, we're thinking of this policy or going down this direction, how's that feel? But to technically think about whether RO is better than treated raw water, or, I don't see that.
Yeah, no, I don't think no more than we are, technically,
Right,
yeah.
right.
I know what it stands for now. Reverse, what was it?
Good job.
But I think when I came in, I was, at the time, I was going to all these different I was trying to hit all the different board and commission meetings. And I went there, you know, they weren't meeting very often, I felt like they didn't have an agenda, felt like it was a bunch of people just getting together and shooting the breeze, to be honest. But I've seen a full turnaround within the last year. I know one of the members, Miles and I, when we interviewed, we put a couple people on there, but one of them was the former mayor of Milligan. And so, and he has a lot of water background as well. But anyway, so I guess for me it comes down to, how do we best utilize them, you know?
Well, I think the only reason why you've seen the turnaround on that board is this board has had a lot more discussion on water than it's ever had before, and that's the only reason why. Otherwise, they would still be in whatever, you know, realm they were operating in before. But it's our discussions, it's our focus, it's our strategic plan initiative that said water is, you know, a key topic that we need to figure out, that I think has generated those conversations. And because we've had a lot more special folks come, you know, and present to us, we're looking at a lot of things, and I think that's what's generated that. It's not because there's something new going on, it's just because our conversation in general, I mean, because we've dictated that.
I go back to what Dr. Jones said. I think that there was 30 to 40 years ago that this board meant a different capability when we didn't have staff that was knowing of the impact, you know, rates, flows down ditches and everything. You know, I mean, we have that expertise that's on staff in key personnel, and so I think it's just it's a matter of we're in a different place going. I'm so grateful that these people want to serve on any of these boards, commissions, etc. But then again, it's a different model now than what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And the capability that we needed to have that board at that time. And has it just come where we don't, it's just being phased out because we have staff that can already advise us on the numbers, the flows, the, you know, where we get our water sources, you know, rates, etc. And, you know, I don't know, I think it's just it's a, whatever the right word is, it's a product of time or whatever, it's a, you know, evolution of time, the evolution of the board that has kind of led us to this point.
I think less public involvement is not good though. So I think these.
Well, but we haven't, we're talking about maybe adding some boards. Because I think some of us have indicated there's some gaps in the current board leadership, so I think even if we're talking about maybe, you know, eliminating or doing something different, I think we're talking about, but there's some new things now in our community that we need to really take a look at. So there would be new opportunities for those folks to be involved, maybe in new ways now, like probably what they were looking at 20 years ago, when they didn't have water people, you know, I mean, I think so, but we haven't had that conversation yet, we're just going through what these are.
Water and sewer specifically though.
Well, I think I've already heard that they're more engaged because we're more engaged about water. I think that's a good thing. I think they should be involved, and we have citizens interested in learning and being engaged about water, I think that's a good thing. These are, like I said, they might be a future board member. I mean, the more we can educate interested public, I think that's good.
Is there something, I use the term key communicator group, but your idea about a group of citizens that have an interest in whether it be Parks and Rec or historic preservation or water and sewer attend our work sessions, having an appointed
Yeah.
communication group and their responsibility is to attend the work session on those topics, or is there something there that would?
I'm just trying to,
Citizen
They should be
involvement.
invited, the water and sewer board
Sure.
should be invited. Are they aware when we have our water meetings?
We've had some board members. that-
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them have come.
yeah.
Well, we've talked about NISP and that stuff, we invited the water and sewer board.
Right, they came to this.
I'm just talking about
But do you
more
need to
efficient,
duplicate,
how can we be
right.
better efficient, not duplicate efforts, not have staff have to be involved in our meetings and they have to be involved. And yes, we're all engaged today and we all have conversation, but what happens in 2020 when the conversation is transportation and it's no longer water, water, water all the time because maybe we have figured out water and solved those problems for at least the next 15 years. So then what, they become another board that's only meeting every 6 months? So, I mean, I don't want to discourage them, but I think, is there a way that we could make them more aware of, for those folks who want to be engaged in water, be more part of the conversations we're already having?
I think that'd be great.
My thing is I don't want to set people up. I don't want to tell people your job is to advise us when really it isn't, you know, so that doesn't feel right. to set people up.
Dr. Jones?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Please.
That you go to the next water board meeting and relay what we've discussed right here and ask them, how do you feel you can be most engaged on this board? You know, on the water and sewer board. And what do you see your function as being? We know many of them don't have any expertise in water. I don't know, Dennis, does anyone on there now have background?
Yeah, well, like Greg Pulowski, he has attended the Water Literate Leaders group. Daryl Zimmelman is a civil engineer, he was a longtime assistant manager in Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District.
Right.
He still does, I think, some consulting.
Milton works with,
Milton, there's a CPA on there,
Yeah.
there's a guy that works for Clear Valley REA, I believe in rates. Julie Klein works for HP. Carlos Medina works in the water and wastewater department in Loveland, City of Loveland.
And Milt's the former mayor.
Yeah.
Milton, the former mayor of Milton.
And Dave, what did Janine tell us, that she's been asked to give some classes or on water conservation, is that?
Yeah, that was her focus.
Yeah.
Really more than.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good outreach right there.
Janine is a longtime tree board member, and if you go down to the Treasure Island Garden in the summer, she's there almost every day.
And Janine and Milt team are definitely your conservation and education folks. They're very passionate about that.
yes.
Milt definitely with like HOAs and such.
Well, and I just want to interject, I think that this board obviously is really how to engage on water and raw water and water treatment, but another huge thing we have coming now is going to be all of our stormwater, getting compliant with all those new regs, and you know, you guys had a presentation from Janine a couple weeks ago, but that may be a project right now that we could really get this board kind of working with staff and getting engaged, because there's going to be a lot of policy things coming out. You know, I think if we were having this conversation 6 months ago, it might have been, geez, these guys never meet, and you know, we're not really sure what we do with them. I think now with the stormwater, we may have a working group for this board to where we may not want to spend too much time, you know, working on that, because we have so many other things, you know, raw water and transportation and so many other growth-related issues. So there may be a chance to really just kind of get them engaged on these other important projects that aren't really right in your front grill right now.
I guess Barry and I have been on the board a year, right? You've been around too long, you've been on both sides, but I can't think of a time in the past year that this board has advised, at least me, on anything. And I don't see them in that role as an advisor. They've been involved, they've come to meetings, that's good, you know. And I think to Miles' point, if they want to be involved in getting knowledgeable, sure, come on, have a seat. But I don't think it's an advisory board at this point.
They did take a vote to advise us on option 2 on the rate increases. Wasn't it?
Yeah, and since
Yeah.
I've been here too, one of the
They
things brought to you
think that's
guys
their
was the
job.
storm drainage, the new storm
Maybe they
drainage
haven't given the
rates.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's
to
the conflict I
extent-
see is that, you know, they
Right.
think they're supposed to advise
Right.
us, and they don't.
So I
How about
guess
recommend?
Yeah.
as a board member,
Yeah.
I guess, who's supposed to
Yeah.
receive the wisdom of the group, I'm not
Yeah.
sure I feel it. So I guess I'd look to the town
Yeah.
management and say, is this a board that you work
Well,
with?
I think it comes back to this board again, they're your advisory board. And I think this board's got a great conversation about kind of the pros and cons of that, but really ultimately, it's really at the pleasure of this board as far as we would like this group to work on this stuff, or we would like them to work on other things. And that's really, I think all these advisory boards should make your jobs better, should make the community better.
Well, and I don't think we should be afraid of changing things. I mean, that's, communities are ever changing, and then nothing's gonna stay the same after, you know, maybe 40 years, you said we'd had this water board or whatever. But I would suggest we move on to look at the next board and kind of conclude all the different boards we kind of have, because I know there's some discussion about some new boards, and then it is, when is too much, and so then there might come the natural conclusion that, you know, if we want to add here, maybe we do need to eliminate here, so that we don't overwhelm all the parties involved, I don't know, but that's what is my suggestion, is let's get through this, because I know we still want to have conversation about maybe some new boards coming.
So Parks, Rec, and Culture is next. There's two boards that we talk with on a monthly basis. So the first one is PRECAB, which stands for Parks, Rec, and Culture Advisory Board. There are seven members on that board. One of them is a school board member who has one of the, what I'll call the term, voting members, and also the town board member that goes to the board. Then we also have the tree board that includes 7 board members. There's no other outside representative on that board other than a town board member that attends those meetings. Both groups have very dedicated people, citizens who are very dedicated to each group. So you can click the next slide.
Does Ivan still go?
No, he does not. I mentioned in the memo, and you'll see this in 2 places when we talk about PRECAB first and then tree board. There are bylaws, but they really are just about how the makeup of the board, not necessarily what they do. So for example, to jump back to the water and sewer where it said to advise in an ordinance, it doesn't say that anywhere in our ordinance for PRECAB or tree board. What it does say though, in the words in the middle there, in terms of, and it kind of looks like what water and sewer does, it's on our website, and it's been there since I arrived, and we couldn't find anywhere in our ordinance where it said that they actually do advise, i.e. recommend a budget, recommend purchase of a park, or get rid of a park, or build capital projects, those kind of things. I noticed that very early on when I got here in late 2015. Both boards were operating very formally. We sat in the board chambers upstairs. Staff presented every time. There were votes taken on just about everything, every policy, every budget, every capital. And I'll be quite frank with you, across the nation, advisory boards in the Parks and Recreation field are not advising in the term of what I think I'm hearing you all conceptually understand what the word advise means. To myself and professionals in my field, advisory boards are just citizen-involved groups that give us being staff, their opinions. That's it. We can take their opinion and act upon it, or we cannot. Because sometimes advisory board, at least in our field, will give us some opinions that I, as a professional, know I can't do that, or I shouldn't do that, or it doesn't act. Doing that wouldn't act in the best interest of the government that we work for, the community that we're serving. So we really changed that. And what was interesting with PRECAB is when I asked the question, every one of them was like, hallelujah.
Yeah.
I just want to sit around a table like we're doing tonight, citizens and staff, and have a conversation. And we did that in early 2016, and we've done that ever since. We now It's very informal. There is a board packet that they get to read and update, as well as topics that we present and go through. But the only thing that they vote on is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. And then they also do vote, we just kept it for the formality piece of it, was they will vote for an accession or a deaccession of a museum item that ultimately comes to you. Quite frankly, that could go away as well. If you read the ordinance, it says they should elect a president, vice president, and a secretary. Did away with it. They elect a president, that's it. I basically run the meeting, the president comes in, starts the meeting, does Robert's Rules of Order, and then turns it over to staff for presentations. And it really is, like we're doing tonight, citizens and staff talking about the good, bad, and the ugly that might be going on within the department. So that's kind of what you see. So you can click next slide.
Who creates the agenda, Eric? You do?
Staff, I do. So really, this is what they do. They're the eyes and ears of the community. There are many people that might see something wrong or right in our parks. They will not call the director.
Right.
They won't email me.
Right.
But a citizen that's out there at a concert in the park that has a complaint about smoking or dogs or the way people are acting or drinking or whatever, a safety issue, they tell the advisory board members. They then become that eyes and ears for us. They do advise us on policies. So for example, we're talking right now about smoking. We've talked to them first to get their opinion. We didn't talk to you. We're getting a survey right now. Early next month, the results of the survey are going to go back to that board. And through that meeting, we will hopefully come out with a joint, what they think as citizens and what staff thinks will be a good policy to come to this board in a work session and recommend. But they may say, ban smoking in the parks. And staff may go, maybe that's not the best route to go. Maybe we should do it just in certain locations. Staff will ultimately make the decision of what comes to you and then tell you, hey, advisory board, this was their opinion. Take it or leave it. Because quite frankly, that is, they're giving us advice or their opinion, but that's it. They're not saying you board should do this. They do get to see our budgets, have input if they think, they'll ask questions similar to you. Why are you spending this much on this project? Or can we put more money in this over here instead of over there? And there's some give and take there. But we don't always agree. I'd say probably 95% of the time we're pretty close. But there are moments where we don't agree at all. And ultimately for me, in my role, I feel like staff is paid to make those decisions to recommend to you and to the manager. And that's what we do. And then the last piece is there are advocates. And I've said this to them many times. Some do a better job than others. When it comes to you want more trails, you want more parks, or you want less of something, speak up. Go to a board meeting. Talk to your fellow citizens. That's what they should do in terms of an advisory board. They are really just citizens giving us staff their opinion. And then lastly, and keep it on that last slide for just a second, I want to mention that Parks and Recreation advisory boards, while they're not mandated, exist in almost every community in the nation that has a Parks and Recreation department. So just keep that in mind because it's a little different with tree boards. So click the next. So just a quick glimpse of what they've been working on, and I'll pass around some handouts real quick. They helped us, and really they just monitored. We created goals with them back in 2016, 2-year goals that were tied to the town's strategic plan at the time. We created them, we gave them quarterly updates, they asked questions, and so I'll pass them around so you can see what those were at the time. They reviewed in 2018, they reviewed every division's function. So every group or division within our department came and did a presentation. They did museum sessions, and I think there was one DIA session, and then they just basically provided feedback for staff. They also approved our 2019 and 20 department goals, and I'll pass those around. Those are ones we as staff are working on now. And really, quite honestly, they tie to your strategic plan currently, but they're kind of a check and balance for you. Now, I meet as the other department heads. We meet on a frequent basis with Shane about your strategic plan. We also meet as a department with our goals that tie to your plan with this board. They're kind of our checks and balances for me to remember, hey, we said we're going to do X. I check in on a quarterly basis with them to make sure and reaffirm that we're meeting what we said we would do over the course of those 2 years. And then continuing to do the exact same thing that they've done. So you can kind of see what they've accomplished. what they're reviewing, what we're talking about. The big thing this next year is our policies. And so smoking is one that's coming to you next month. We're gonna come, I think the survey actually closed today. We're talking about private use of businesses in our park system. So for example, Christy has a personal training business and she wants to go at Main Park and do yoga in the park and charge her clients $50. Is it fair for her to do that with her private business in a town park that was paid for by taxpayer dollars? She doesn't have any overhead, she's not paying to rent it, she just shows up and takes people's money. Is that fair? We don't have a policy about that today. So staff knows that. We're bringing all those policies to that board to talk about as citizens. What do we think about homelessness in our parks? Those kind of things. We're gonna bounce those ideas that we see, and I think many of you said, just bounce ideas off of them as citizens, get their input, and then we make a professional decision, whether we agree with them or not. So click on the next. So some things that we're considering changing, we actually just, in another one, sometimes I found with this pre-CAB board, you just ask them a question, they love it. So we changed from formal to informal. Staff has always hated, you get in here at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and that board meeting wasn't until 7 at night. So this past month we said, you know what, could we start at 6? Oh, please, I'd love to eat dinner later, not at 10 o'clock at 9. So we now meet at 6, and in a couple of months, we're gonna add subcommittees. So these are just, they don't do anything other than meet with staff from 5 to 6 and talk about issues that are out there. So if someone's interested in trails, we're gonna advertise that, hey, the month of June is Trails Month. Come talk to Wade about what you want to see in our trails. Or come talk to Tara about rec programs. And if there's nothing to talk about, or no one shows up, okay, go grab a Snickers bar and wait till 6 and we'll have our meeting. But I am all for more public input, because the more we have a public input, it will then give us the ability as staff to make the best decision for the residents in Windsor. So that's what the addition of subcommittees that we're hoping to do in the next few months. So,
But those subcommittees will only meet one time
They'll come-
on a certain month?
they'll come at 5 o'clock. So the regular board meeting is the first Tuesday of every month at 6. Subcommittees will be from 5 till 6. Just if you're interested in trails, this month is trails, show up for trails. If you're interested in open space next month, come talk about it.
How often do they repeat then?
So we haven't figured that out, probably rotating those 3 circles, or if
Once a
something's really a hot topic, we may have to say, well, you know what, recreation, you're gonna wait. There was 100 people showed up for trails, we probably ought to do trails again next month.
Are all our boards open to the public?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
They are.
Yes.
It seems like I always get the feeling it's a brainstorming session
It is.
with the members that are there. And I know I changed when I first got there, I was probably a little bit more vocal. I kind of backed off a little bit and thought, well, geez, I should give my input when it's a town board meeting. I should more act as a liaison, not try to steer the meeting or jump in too much. But so you've maybe seen my involvement change a little bit, but I see a lot of people, have you thought of this to the staff? Or I used to live here and they did that, or my neighbor said this. It just seems like there's a lot of spitballing going on.
Yeah.
So I guess, Eric, if you did this, or given what you've changed, do we really need to change a charter or some ordinance somewhere to reflect reality instead of?
The only thing for this board is to just say you're gonna elect a president, and that the town board, we don't need a secretary because we send staff to take minutes.
But do you even have to elect a president if the
Well,
staff is already?
The way Robert's Rules of Orders states that someone needs to kind of run the meeting, and I'd prefer that it be still citizen-led, not totally staff-led, although I will tell you that once we get through approving the minutes, the agenda, and they turn it over to action items, it's really myself or staff talking, and to Barry's point, it's a conversation, a brainstorm about whatever the topic is.
I guess my point, so on the first slide on this, you mentioned there's bylaws.
Yes.
Do the bylaws reflect the way you function today, or do they reflect the prior analyzing expenditures and making your?
They reflect the way we operate today. What I found was, and I don't know where they came from, and it was even more so in the tree board, they were operating more formally when they weren't approved in an ordinance to do so. Not like what you saw in the water and sewer board, where it says you shall advise. It doesn't exist in Parks and the Parks Culture Board.
Okay. So you don't need a board?
I don't think we need a change.
This
in
just
terms of
sounds
the
like
ordinance.
exactly what I think we'd all anticipate, a citizen not any citizen input.
I think the word advisory can be taken multiple ways. I just know that we view it as, it's an opinion. Give us your opinions.
It's like anything I say to Julie. It's advisory.
Moving on to trees.
You're taking it under advisement too?
Eric, before you move
How's that
on,
working out for you, dude?
Wonder if she's
when you
watching.
have these subcommittee meetings, does the information from that get into the minutes of
Yes.
the Park and Rec? So it'll get back to us.
Correct. So what's going to happen is, let's say all of you showed up for a subcommittee on trails. The staff member that's there, which in that case would be Wade, he would take notes, and then he would go to the pre-cap board meeting and say, our subcommittee met for an hour and we talked about trails, and these were the highlights. That's how it makes it into the minutes. So tree board, created in the late 70s. It really came about due to urban forest, the Dutch elm disease. And back then, and this is the big change that I'll get to in a second, back then tree boards were created when that was when Tree City USA came about. And there were, and I'll give you the 4-prong test in a second, but we've been Tree City USA for 37 years. There are only 8 other communities in Colorado that have 37 years or more for Tree City USA. So big feather in our cap. They also were operating very formally, although the code doesn't state that. It states the same thing as pre-cab did, which is you have a board, you have a secretary, a president, you have a vice president, and when you should meet. I saw this very early on as well. I tackled pre-cab first, so it didn't. This one didn't really change until almost 17. But some of it, the change came about also from Scott and planning with the codification of their code. And what was happening is Tree Board was actually reviewing every single landscape development project that came through. Every one of them. Commercial, residential, didn't matter size, they were doing all that. Why, I don't know. It's not in the code, it's not in the ordinance to say that they have to do that. I'm assuming that staff just allowed that to grow over the years and just organically happened. But it did empower that group to feel like they really had a say in telling the board, the town board or staff what to do, when in fact they are just truly an advisory board like what I've described. So with the help of planning's code change, we've eliminated that. This board really is just doing 3 functions: education, advocacy, and I added the 3rd function, even though it really is the same one, is Arbor Day and Tree Sick Day. They are huge volunteers for that event. They are big advocates about trees, that kind of thing. But we became less formal. They don't get plans anymore. And it took a lot of discussions. They did not like it. It's like taking a cookie away from a kid that's been eating cookies all day. So but that change came about and they've gotten used to it and it's okay now. But so staff handles all of that through the planning department. So since 2000, sometime in 17 and in 18, it's just those 3 things: feedback from citizens, education, and advocacy. So if you click to the next one. They are the eyes and ears. They advise us in terms of their opinion. They advocate and they educate and volunteer. So this is the big piece. And so in 16, or I'm sorry, in 8, they have 18 and 19 goals, and I'll pass those out as well. But you can see, as those go around, I challenge this board, since they're not doing landscaping anymore, review, to educate the public. We don't have enough staff to educate on every topic that we have. So I challenge them to run so many programs in terms of trees, landscaping, that kind of stuff. When the mayor came out with Coffee with the Mayor, they instantly go, well, could we do Coffee with the Tree Board? Absolutely, go ahead. They just recently did one, what, 2 months ago, Miles? Was
The symposium?
The symposium.
Last month.
Was it last month? 50 people showed up. That was, I mean, to me, that is a home run for that group of folks. They're super dedicated. They've been on that board for a long time. They know just as much as staff when it comes to the urban forest. Let them educate. And so that's what they do.
That was a good event I attended, was part of that. It was excellent. We also had 2 members from Water and Sewer Board there who gave a brief report on why we need to increase water rates and conserve water. They did a nice
And that was totally run by them. They put it
Yeah, they did a
together,
good job.
they brainstormed. All we did from a staff point of view was advertise it, and it was simple. It was a flyer, Facebook post, next door website, done.
Do we have to have a tree board to have the Tree City
You do
designation?
not, so that's next, so click to the next slide. So I wanted to share with you what they're doing, as you can see there, what they're working on, which is what I passed out here. Click to the next slide. Oh, go back. So Tree City USA does not require a tree board. This is the 4-prong test. Tree boards, to become a Tree City USA, you have to have a tree board or a professional department. We have both. Tree care ordinance, which we have. Community forestry program with an annual budget of at least $2 per capita. We have that. And we also observe Arbor Day and why we do a proclamation. So if you do those 4 things, you still obtain your Tree City USA. So we do not, given our size and that we have a professional staff, have to have a tree board in order to continue to be Tree City USA. We already have a professional staff on board. Most communities, when you get around 20, 25,000, don't have tree boards anymore because they've got the professional staff. Fort Collins doesn't have one, Loveland doesn't have one, Greeley doesn't have one. So I'm not recommending.
And then I was just saying, Cortez, we just had our pre-cab board had that function as well. So we just said, here's our board.
And where I came from in Grandview, Missouri, like the subcommittee idea, the tree board met every month from 5 to 6, and then the liaison reported to the pre-cab board, and that was how. But we also had both pre-cab. It was a subcommittee of pre-cab, and we had a professional firm that. So we had that as well there. So I think what you see here is both of these groups are just a group of citizens giving us our opinions. Pre-cab has more of a global look, so everything that encompasses Parks, Rec, and Culture. The tree board has a much smaller scope, but I will say that they volunteer a lot more, and they're big time into education and advocating trees and our urban forest and landscaping.
They seem to be like experts in trees. They're not just like, hey, I'm interested in trees.
Yeah, so Allison O'Connor has the same qualifications, if not more, than our forester. And she's the president, has been for a while now. She works, Larimer County.
Extension.
Extension, yes, thanks. And then the rest of the board's been on there so long that, yeah, quite frankly, they're experts. Absolutely.
I wonder if there isn't an opportunity here though. You said they hit, I mean, obviously they are excellent educators and they do an excellent job of this Arbor Day celebration. But I also heard something from the Water and Sewer Board folks about conservation. And really this tree thing at the end of the day is related to conservation.
Absolutely.
I wonder if if we all wanted to keep this as some kind of a board, but I wonder if we could broaden that horizon a little bit more other than just tree board to something a little bit broad, about conservation. We've started this water challenge that we have every April as well. We used to do water conservation kits. I don't know if are we still gonna do that or? But I wonder if they could be more that voice in our community. I mean, that wouldn't take away from trees, but expand maybe that conversation and maybe some folks that are really on the Water and Sewer Board who have their focus really is conservation.
Yeah.
That would be their opportunity to be part of that group.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example, and I didn't mention it, but when you had the board members' names up there for water and sewer, we just Friday received a $15,000 grant from Northern Water, thanks to Janine is one of them, and then now I'm blanking on the gentleman's name, the master gardener,
Bill Pratt.
Bill Pratt, to do some studies of the Treasure Island irrigation and all of our community parks, the large ones, to study our irrigation system for finding areas where we're probably weak and can then save or make changes to save non-potable water in the future. So I think to your point, maybe there's a way to look at meshing those two boards in some way, almost into a conservation.
Something, because what I'm,
Group.
yeah, and did you want
That
to
really
say something,
educates,
Jessica?
because that's what, I would argue that provide us your opinion as citizens. We can take it or leave it. And I would argue most of the time we take it. And then, the second part of that is educate, do classes. I can't send Ken off to teach 40 hours of class. That takes him 40 hours if he's not doing his job.
Right.
We need that educational section. So maybe there's a way to merge some of that piece together.
And to work to tie in classes, joint classes, Janine, Willie, she bring in the extension office from Multnomah County, and we're planning the landscaping programs for water conservation for first-time homebuyer, or for new homebuyers.
Right.
So there's a tie there, and a tree class and what trees to plant is part of that, so.
Yeah, because when I look at these, so we have, there's 7 boards that we discussed tonight. And when you look at, there's 3 that I think we have to keep intact, right, because of how they're allocated.
Yeah, and I'd like to pass this out, Mayor. This is basically, highlight, the first 2 are Planning Commission and VOA, they're just kind of non-negotiable. The next 5, it should be the next 6 are current boards. Somehow we met, the DDA wasn't highlighted, we have a DDA. And then the rest of the, starting with Youth Commission down, are ones that other neighboring jurisdictions have.
Okay.
So this is just kind of a little bit for the board to talk about what other people have versus what we have.
Because the other one that I would say that we should probably try to change at this point in time is Windsor Housing Authority. Because they are kind of, and especially where they're kind of headed now. But I kind of see those 3 as their own standalones, and I'm wondering if the rest of these boards, or whatever new boards we get, we can't use how Eric has turned pre-cab more into what we are calling advisory boards. So, if we do keep historic preservation, it's no longer a commission, it becomes an advisory board. But I think the other big thing that needs to happen is, behind all these, we need to define what an advisory board is, as, providing opinions and, all of this. So again, back to your point, Ken, that we're not giving them authority or thinking there's a certain level of authority when maybe there isn't, but yet that we know that there's value we want them to give, and collect all this valuable input and thought, but here's the process on how it would be used.
The only other community with a tree board is Berkeley.
It's based on size, that's why.
And this was, and thanks Jess for her research to really kind of pull this together, but, there are other tree boards, but I think like Eric said, it's just, you hit a certain size and they're just not.
How many people do we have in our forestry department?
We have 3, and then we add 2 seasonals in the summer. And, those are some challenges that we face in terms of staffing, but that is typical for our community size, but obviously we're growing in that area.
I think what Eric's done, to the extent he's redefining the functions or the roles, I think the purpose you have in this one slide here, eyes and ears, advise, advocate, educate, volunteer, should be all of our boards. That just fits I think the role we would all perceive.
Except for the 3 that we've mentioned that maybe stay as their own.
Yes.
As their dictated, yeah.
It seems like the tree board, I'm pretty new to it, but it seems to be very successful based on that definition of, they're active, they educate, they advise, they're, I would say, experts in their field.
They are, and it took a while to get them to, they were used to looking at plants.
They're tough men to crack.
That was a big change for them, and it took a year.
Do you think tree board would be open though to becoming something bigger? Or is their focus so, I don't know what actually falls under this community sustainability,
I'll give you
but, if they were to now have to handle conservation.
Miles knows this answer, but
Couple other
I will
things
give you,
or no?
I'll give you a quick snippet of what I've tried to do for 8 months with that group. They are dyed-in-the-wool tree people. I wanted them to have a greater say in pre-cab. I asked them to pick a liaison when we had a couple of vacancies, pick a liaison. We'll get this board to appoint that liaison to pre-cab so that you can have a greater seat at the table, the bigger global picture. I thought for 4 months, they wanted pre-cab to come to their meetings because they see themselves as equals. Well, and they are equal in terms of they're advising our department, but they only have this small scope. So my only fear with that group is they're so dyed in the wool about trees and the conservation of trees only. I don't know whether how receptive they'll be to that, but I'm absolutely willing to have that conversation with them because I think, as you've seen, and I think they're seeing, conservation and education is where they're very successful in this community.
Well, I think we could position.
You two have both heard my conversation for 6
Yeah, I watched some of that when I was fairly new to the board. Yeah, they were kind of kicking and screaming, I think, to come along with that plan. But one thing I think we maybe take the approach of is how successful the tree board has been in incorporating other things to kind of follow that model.
Could be, yeah.
I would agree following the model. They're trees. I mean, I don't want to say they don't care about parks, but they see the trees, they don't see the park.
Correct.
They see the tree, not the equipment. They see the tree, not the ball field.
Not the forest.
Not the forest.
Yes.
They see every tree in the forest.
So they're not interested in being on the pre-cab. And to me, it was like, what do you mean? Like, you go to a park, you see the tree, and no, they see their function as trees and advocating for trees. And
But obviously, there has been a connection in their minds to water conservation.
Yes.
So the
Those
idea
are
of tying it to overall conservation makes a lot of sense. I like that, Mayor.
Well, in the sick tree days, is hugely popular.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
So
They do a great
could they
job of
become
that.
one of these
I do so.
subcommittees though under pre-cab where
They
they
don't.
come and meet
They could,
before 5?
they could,
or
but I will tell you that there is a hierarchy
Subcommittee,
that would be
issue
resistant?
that they would not like.
Okay,
the Burnasses.
but they kind of, don't they self-run or not? Or who,
So Ken is the liaison,
Yeah,
and we, myself and Bob are alternating every month going with him as we continue to shift their focus, because it's easy for them to go back to wanting to review plans. So it's been a year plus of trying, and we're making progress, but it's not something that I'm just gonna turn loose back to just Ken at this point, because I wanna make sure that they keep going on this education path.
And to note on water conservation, the tree part is just a piece of it. I know John and I have been talking a lot more about how we work on our water conservation plan, and we haven't yet touched commercial or industrial types of plans, conservation plans and programs, so it would be a piece, definitely. And then I like that they work together right now, and I'm thinking about each other, that's a good thing.
yeah. I mean, what if this board though said we want those pieces to now come together and, I mean, if it's Ken or you who are creating those agendas, that would force them to have conversations above and beyond trees all the time. It's part of that board.
We could, I think, John, I think we would probably lose a few folks. But
yeah,
I'm not saying it's
they-
impossible.
Yeah.
We can definitely talk.
Or
about it.
maybe
If they cared about water, they would
Right.
join the water board. That they love trees, and that's why they. I mean, it seems like I don't know what we're trying to accomplish here. They seem like they do a lot of good stuff.
So
I don't know what we're
we
trying
don't
to.
want to break up the process of whatever we're doing, is what you're saying?
Don't want what?
We don't want to break the tree board in the process of whatever we're doing.
Yeah, it
If we're
seems like it's
reorganizing.
pretty well. Probably frustrates Eric maybe a little, but they seem to do what we want them to do, and they educate and they advocate and they raise money. I think it's the only board that probably raises money.
I think at this point, maybe leave it the way it is, we keep planting those seeds.
Oh, jeez.
Really?
You've been stewing that one. You're just proud of that one.
Things just come out of my head
Good job.
without, my wife always says filter, I don't filter it, it just comes out.
Conversation over.
But start, because they are so passionate about what they're doing. And the Sick Tree Day is a great service in the community. They do a lot of good stuff. So maybe you don't want to break something that's working, but keep encouraging them that, and I know like Janine and some others are really concerned about water conservation, so keep playing that theme, you know.
They're very passionate. They're passionate about trees.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember
But they're also smart enough to
doing
know
a
about
couple
water
interviews for
conservation,
tree
something
board, and
that
it's
they can move
all
forward.
horticulture. That's it.
Yeah.
But you could, like you said, you could put conservation on the agenda, just
Yeah,
have
just-
I mean,
whoever
couldn't you
comes in
kind of
every.
just slowly trickle it in?
Trickle it in. Get a stream trickling in there.
The tree board needs the water.
Just saying.
I think they'll cut it down and it'll take root.
It'll take root.
Well, because I think where we're going with this, one of the boards that I think is important that we need to be thinking about adding is a youth and/or a senior and/or, I don't know if there makes sense, we call them something else, a community, but, or combine those together. Again, we don't wanna create, another 15 boards here, or have 15 boards where that's all, we've got staff every day, having to do is worry about all these boards. But I do think that as this community continues to grow, and again, I think you brought up something that I think that's why we should look at youth. If we're looking at leaders to our future, we need to start involving our youth in whatever that looks like, advisory board, commission, but
Well, and
some way.
all of our surrounding communities have them
Yes.
too, so.
I've been thinking a lot about this, because Coffee the Mayor has come up a number of times. I've watched this for a couple of years and listened, and I think there's, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something there for a youth advisory and maybe a senior advisory. In my ideal world, there'd be some connection between the two of them. But just, and my hesitation is always, my least favorite word is patience, my least favorite word is committee. So you don't want to start something unless there's a real meaningful task for them to do. But I think one task that either senior group or youth group could do would just be a clearinghouse even for what resources are available in this region for our youth, what resources are available in this region for seniors. And I can give some examples. And then another task would be, how do you communicate that to a community that has 30,000 people with no newspapers or television or anything? I can think of a lot of things they could do. We've talked about volunteer days to help seniors clean up if we have a brush day or something. There's some problems with that in terms of liability, I know, but youth groups could help organize volunteer services for seniors. I just see a lot of opportunity there, so I think there's something there. I think maybe Shane or somebody talked too about some communities invite students to sit in on other advisories, which doesn't really go too well because it's boring.
Well,
But
yeah.
I think there's other ideas about how to get youth involved. And you've talked about developing the next generation of leaders in the community too. So there's something there that I think we ought to try to figure out what we'd like to do with that.
Which we did lose in between the transition, but we had started a couple years ago, Youth and Government Day.
Yeah.
It was in February. Now, maybe, I think we need to look at incorporating that back maybe in small cities, towns week or whatever that is in October, maybe we perhaps could. But that was another thing where it never quite got the level where I envisioned, but I kind of almost did. Because I think a lot of folks don't even understand or realize the opportunities about just working in your own community.
Oh, yeah.
All the different departments, and so, but even at that level, again, but that's just a one-day something, but I don't know if it would lead up to whoever's on this commission or group.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, they would plan this kind of thing.
I think it's youth leaders. I think there are youth that want to stand out, that want to get involved, that want to be leaders of their grade, of their school. I mean, in high school, it's the student council, that step up to be natural leaders of their student body and stuff. So I mean, they're out there. I think it's just a matter of knowing we value you, we want you in our community.
And Shane Cortez, right, you went through this process to identify and create.
We did, so we had two tracks. The first is, when we did the Orton Family Foundation Heart and Soul Project, which was a lot of community engagement, really good aspect of the community. We had some high school kids that were involved in that, and it really just wanted to keep that voice in the community. Basically every advisory commission that we had every advisory board, we basically made a voting member position for youth. So we basically just said, you know, if it's a 5-member board, one person shall be, you know, high school youth, and they were full voting members, because again, you know, where we kept them off were anything that was, you know, like planning commission, BOA, if there was anything quasi-judicial, or we didn't want like kids getting yelled at by a developer, you know, it just seemed like that was maybe a step too far. So we had recap and golf and library and just all the kind of little commissions we had. And then we were just establishing, on my way out, a youth advisory commission. So that was a little bit more formal, and the commission existed different from the different advisory boards. And it was its own standalone board, and they basically, the reason why I held off doing it is because in my research and talking to the city of Brighton and the city of Durango, who had done a presentation at CML maybe 3 years ago, it's really a staff-intensive group, and I wouldn't have intuitively thought that. But talking to their staff, it's about 10 hours a week of work, so it's about 25% of the staff time. So it's like, where does this go? So we had to kind of create that framework in Cortez to start that commission. But
What was their function, what was their responsibility?
well, you know, so that's just it with the youth commission, and really I kind of took the lead from Brighton. Like the city of Brighton, their council does not appoint youth commissioners. Youth commission appoints the commissioners. They really are self-driven. They really determine what they're gonna work on, what they're gonna do. They report back to their governing board, but they don't really, they do a lot of things independently of them. So a lot of times, you know, like they can either maybe take on a special issue, it may be teen suicide or vaping or texting while driving or whatever it is, so they can do like a public information campaign in school and kind of use that. They can also do special projects. It may be, hey, let's go and pick up the trash along the highway, or, you know, whatever that is. So they kind of self-direct on things they're gonna work on, and I think every year they go through that. In some communities, like in Durango, I know that the mayor is basically the liaison to that, and it's really the mayor's advisory commission. So you can do this a lot of different ways. And again, I mentioned Durango and Brighton, but as you see from the list, there's a lot of different communities that do this. And the budget varies wildly as well. I think Durango's annual budget for this is under $10,000. That doesn't count the staff time, that's just for the commission's budget. I think Brighton's is like 35, 40,000. Nice. Because anybody who's on the youth commission, they send to NLC every year. So I know you like that.
It's bigger than that.
Miles?
You more liaison.
You're recognizing my youth.
Well, but I'm always one of these who says, why reinvent if there's something already in place? So I do know, and I don't know about Hooter or Thompson, but I do know Windsor High School already has a leadership class. Well, no, it's not even SALT. It's actually, there is a SALT group, but besides that, there is a class, a leadership class, and it's not even who is on the, what do you call the high school government?
Student council.
It's not the student council
Yes.
kids. It is leadership class. There's a leadership teacher up there who teaches that. So I don't know why maybe we couldn't identify if there is already this class or group of kids going through these classes in our school districts. Maybe surely through that curriculum at some point, they study government. And maybe we just become, I mean, this is, again, I'm talking about just a starting point. But maybe is there a way that, like if they're gonna study government in October or whatever, we look at ways that we could bring them here for a day, or, you know, and broaden that horizon about that learning piece. Or if not, how do we add that to part of that curriculum? Or just like Leadership Wall County and Leadership Larimer County, at one point in their classes, all those kids, I call them kids, but they're in their 20s and 30s, but they all come together, right? And then you have elected officials who come and have lunch with them, and it's like the speed dating thing where we sit at the tables for 10 minutes and then we move around and have conversations. But maybe that would be kind of an initial starting point at least.
That's it. I like that idea. Because we could certainly talk, and again, if we could just plug in with them, you know, my only concern is I do think that we do want to engage our youth. I do think that some 16-year-old right now is going to be on the town board in 5 years. I'm working for her. And so it'd be great to like meet her now and, you know, answer her questions. And so,
Be your boss.
yeah, exactly,
he'll be your boss.
exactly.
The other part is, how, you said they got involved in this Heart and Soul project. So you all know that I've been having lots of these conversations for a year with police and school and families and parents and all, and then it elevated to my faith and kindness week. And then I met with Well County Prevention Partners. And I think what we kind of determined is mentoring and bringing groups and peers together in a place and showing what we have is good and is the way that everybody kind of wanted to go. So out of that, after coming to Well County, and I don't know, and I'm sure you haven't had time to look at any dates or anything, but we're already talking about taking an event that we started last year in May for our first ever safety fair, riding off the coattails of that, coming up and creating not necessarily a safety fair, but recreating that, because many of those same folks would be involved, our police, I'm sure our police, our fire, you know, library, all of those. But maybe, and I'm thinking beyond, I know I called it Family Day, but I think maybe we even extend it above just Windsor Family Day. Maybe it's a Community Care Day, and it's called Share Because You Care. And it's all of these important resources that come together and are in place. And then I'm wondering if we could get this youth, maybe through the school or whatever, because you said that's kind of what kicked it off, right? They were really involved in this Heart and Soul project.
Right.
Maybe we see if we can't get a bunch of these kids involved in our Community Care Day project to help us build and put this all together, because it's really about them that we want to put this together. It's about the kid. It's because we are concerned about our kids in this community that we're putting this together anyway. And we have to have kids involved, because as I was telling some kids when I went down to the Brighton, I went down to Brighton and talked to a bunch of their kids they had about 1,000 kids come to from all over the state came to Brighton Youth Days last week. But what I told them is, I can tell you something, I can have, you know, some other town administrator tell you something, but you guys don't even listen to your parents half the time, right? I mean, who are they better going to learn from and talk to is their peers. Right. So we have to get their peers involved in whatever we do, because if their peers are there and their peers are telling them or, you know, leading the way, then we have a better rate of success.
Right, and was this their youth commission? Is that why they have?
The youth commission, yeah, kicked it off, but it's grown into this really large thing, and now they invite, I even sent it on to the school superintendent here in Windsor and said, hey, have you ever invited our kids to go to this?
Right.
It's a really big, it's a 2-day deal that they host down there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody in Windsor, and I went and ended up talking to 3 pods of kids, and none of them were from Windsor, so.
You know, my daughter came to me, she's in the National Honor Society, and said, Dad, I need to get so many volunteer hours, where do I go? And I went to a couple places where I volunteered, and you know, you have to be 18, certain places like a rescue mission, things like that, in certain cases. And so I have them down at the fire station at this benefit, the pancake breakfast coming up in a few weeks, and so they're gonna work that, and they had to go out, they gave them the flyers to go put out business to business. And they started bringing in some of their friends that, you know, because they just didn't know where to go, you know, where to do this, Dad, and then they go out on the fire station, they actually end up having fun. So, I mean, we could link in with the schools and they
I think actually on
kind
some
of pair
college
up kids.
applications, you have to have some volunteer time now.
Yeah.
Maybe if we create this event, we could say there's a
Yeah,
volunteer.
Go to the schools and say, hey, we have an opportunity for kids that need to volunteer. Because I find once you volunteer, even some kids will do it begrudgingly, you know, I have to do this. But then once they do it, they have fun, they make the connection, and then they feel good about it when they leave even, you know?
That's part of my idea. I used the word clearinghouse, but I think just communicating what opportunities are out there for youth. You know, because kids do need to volunteer, but they don't know where to go. And that's a good example. What opportunities are out there? Same thing for seniors. What opportunities are out there for transportation for your doctor in Fort Collins seniors? Multiple ways of doing that. So there's a lot of opportunities that take to just gather and disseminate information about what's available for people.
Well, and I do want to just interject this, since the board has talked about, you know, maybe we do need to take a look at all these kind of advisory boards, what advisory means and what they're working on. If we're going to go through any kind of retool, is there interest from this board seeing if we could just maybe put a youth representative on those. Cause that's.
On all these advisory boards?
Right, I mean, because that's not really that hard, it doesn't really require a lot of staff work, we've already got it, Scott's going to the meeting, it's just, you know, somebody who's on there, I don't know.
And what do? You just add that to the I mean, when you send that out, or would you do
Well,
something special outreach to the schools to let them know?
We would, I would outreach to the schools if we're gonna do that. And then, you know, we would just say in our code, you know, we show up one youth member, she'll be a member of Windsor Severance High Schools, and, you know, 16 to 18 years old, it's 1-year appointments, they can reapply.
For what, any school?
Yes. Well, I would say any Windsor or Severance school, so obviously I would not leave out Thompson or, any other school district.
Yeah, just
Windsor resident.
Windsor residents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we have 3 school districts.
Well, I'm sorry, when I say Windsor school,
Yeah, I
I
know what you
mean,
mean, yeah.
I'm sorry, I mean.
Well,
Yeah,
Charter, public, Thompson.
right.
Pooter,
Right.
as long as you're,
Res,
as long as you're residents.
we've got
I think
about
it's-
six.
it has to be a Windsor
Doesn't matter
resident.
where you go to school, as long as you
Yeah.
live in Windsor.
How does
Mea
that-
culpa, I said that incorrectly, I apologize.
How does that change the makeup of a board though? Is it about now all of a sudden you have to add 2 people
No,
because,
I
or as someone
I
comes
would say
off?
again, that's what if we have a 5-member board, maybe just say, look, we're not gonna kick anybody out, but next time we have a vacancy on this board, we're gonna replace them with this youth. I don't think we'd wanna add more, I think in Cortez, we just,
You would put them on planning commission though.
I would
yeah.
not.
I mean,
or, you know,
and so they're not really voting on anything but
We don't want them
minutes
to witness
if we
them.
go back to
Right.
Eric's model anyway.
Yeah, they would just have a full say, I mean, if they're on
So
the
why
tree
would we
board.
even eliminate our official board? We might not even get any. I mean, I think they would be in addition to
Okay.
our regular boards.
Oh,
You just would have a youth person
Don't
added to
eliminate, right.
Right.
every board instead of
Right.
eliminating.
Right.
Because none of these boards, if there's not a real vote, I mean, except for, because we wouldn't really implement one for planning or Board of Adjustments or maybe on the Windsor Housing Authority. Now, maybe we could say those boards could have,
Well.
I don't know if
yeah,
somebody was interested in
I
sitting
think
in
we
all
try
that
to,
stuff, but,
I would suggest we avoid that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
okay.
because they get into quasi judicial stuff
Yeah,
and the
that's true.
process, I think it's better to just
too complicated.
keep youth, now I wanna say that for, the housing authority, I think if anyone was really interested in affordable
Yeah.
housing issues, I think they could add value, to at least in an,
That can count as a
execution.
volunteer service
Mhm.
if you have to
Yeah.
apply for colleges.
Yeah, but when I say full voting there, I just mean like they've got a seat, they're not like, it's like, well, here's a kid and they have to sit here, they don't participate, I mean, they have a full voice and it's just their, part of the conversation.
Right, right. So, we've been at this for 2 hours, and we still have 2 other agenda items. So where do we wanna go with this, or do you have any suggestions or direction that, enough stuff that you could go back with something and come back with some thoughts or suggestions, or?
Kind of, I think that to kind of sum up what I heard is, this board sees that all of these boards have value in things that they're doing. I think that we want to maybe look and at least look at their scope and make sure they're all understanding that they're advisory boards and exactly what this board expects them to do, what kind of the community expects them to do, which is to a little bit more discuss these issues, be the eyes and ears of the community, advise staff, give them their thoughts. So that was the general of what I heard, and then obviously adding looking at adding a youth member on each one of these. So I think that we were gonna look, I don't know if we're gonna research a little bit more on whether or not the tree board and the water board could maybe become some kind of conservation board, so we could certainly research that. I think we could also research whether historical, we talked a little bit about that, the CLG status, whether or not we could add a couple board members from the Historical Society on them, so we've got a few things we could research. And kind of
Does
come
the
back
tree
with.
board have enough to meet every single month? I mean, do they usually meet every single month? Because I'm wondering on that, if you did try to merge somehow water and tree board, what if, like every other month, it was their tree, it was about tree and or just
This time of
water.
year they do.
And like an
land
odd
use.
month, and then the even month it was conservation or something, if there wasn't.
It's a mix, it depends on what, like, with Arbor Day going on right now,
They meet
they
lots.
meet a lot on that.
Well, or maybe they're 6 months out of the year from this month to this month, and the next year, part of the year is something else.
Water board's pretty, their next, big agenda item is to take a tour of the wastewater plant at our next meeting. That change in the board has really driven some high interest in everything we do.
Okay.
So, William Mayor, I can also just kind of talk to the leadership team too, and kind of get their thoughts from what they heard, and I think we can certainly come back with something and maybe.
I think the biggest point too is come back with a definition of what these role, like, kind of like what you stated, but I don't know if it's actually written down anywhere.
Correct.
And I mean, and I like what you said, David, those 4 bullet points he had up there, but really define and call, like, these, if these are called advisory boards, the role of an advisory board member is da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and serves these 4 goals or purposes or whatever.
I did want to mention this, you have Public Art Commission down here for future potentially. We just literally kicked off the public art plan, it's all internal at this moment, we haven't gone public with it. But I think one of the goals, when that plan's done, probably into next year, hopefully something like a Public Art Commission comes out of it, if that's what we hear from the citizens in terms of wanting more public art.
I think absolutely.
So that's just a kind of put in the back of your brain for a year or so.
You'll take on that controversy.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't want to lose the idea of a possibility of a senior advisory or youth advisory.
Yeah.
Another one of my hesitations though is staff. So that's something else I want you to think about and maybe give us some ideas.
Well, yeah, I know on the youth
I've looked at what
advisory.
other communities are doing, there's some really good things I think would help our community, but I'm also sensitive to the time it takes to manage those. So, yeah.
Does it make sense though too to also chart, like with Windsor Housing Authority, they do work with a lot of seniors.
Yeah. They don't really, I think
don't
there's a
know.
lot of senior issues
Too
in
many.
advisory capacity.
Well, and my
I
2
think
cents on it too is we
communications-
see this at Coffee with the Mayor. We have a lot of senior input.
Yeah.
I mean, seniors are, granted, it's a lot of the same faces.
Yeah.
I think seniors know how the process works. They know the role of local government, et cetera. The youth, though, has been my concern because
Yeah.
the youth are, well, when they teach them in school about government, because I spoke at a government, they teach them about state, county, federal, and the local, who does what, where's town hall, what do they do? I mean, all of that kind of stuff is, it's not even on their radar, as far as how they could get involved even at 21 or something like, he was saying. So I'm not trying to discredit what you're saying. I think
No,
that
it's
there's a
okay.
need for that. I just wish there were more youth involved in knowing what's going on with it.
Well, we do have, don't we have a pretty good senior group through the rec center? That's really, more pulling them together for activities and
Yeah,
learning
there's 2
and
groups.
socializing?
There's the
I'll let them
lunch,
give their
there's the
opinion.
lunch group, and then there's this really becoming more robust senior group that's touring all over town to different businesses, and the rec center is one of their stops, and so that, they've kind of self-created this thing in the last 6 months, and it's very popular.
Is that what I'm seeing on next door?
Yes.
Windsor
That's-
Senior
yep,
or something,
yep.
something.
Yeah, do they have a sign up too, is it like,
They don't sign up through us, they're signing up through one or 2 of their folks that are on next door, but they're going to different places for coffee or lunch. They come and play cards or hang out.
Big group?
It's huge, it's 70 plus.
So I think that's even better. I mean, as long as we've got a place where our seniors feel like they have a place to go, where if they can find out where there's resources. I think your staffs can
You
direct
come
them.
once or twice. That might be an opportunity, maybe, is we ask them if they wanna schedule a quarterly, a board member shows up and talks to them.
And then pretty quick, they're sucked into the pickleball
Yeah,
stuff.
well, and I presented at their luncheons a
Oh,
couple
you
of
did?
different
Okay.
times too. But, and that's all the better if we can have our public come together to create their own groups and don't have to have government involved at all, unless we want to. And choose to. Not mandated that we have to be there or spend
Yeah,
money.
send them a
He's a
pre-sale.
Miles and
Vet them through the tree board first.
Send them through the tree board
I
first.
told him Miles is term limited, so he's in his district, so he'd be good to run next time.
I would encourage it.
Okay, so are we complete on our advisory board conversation this evening? Okay, let's bring up Stacy to join us at the
You can take
table.
those spots.
Take a break.
Okay, let's take a break.
That was the look at the death. She sat here for 2
Well,
hours.
she's coming up here, you just should know that because there was some testimony today down at the courthouse, some folks are calling.
People come from C now.
No, yeah.
Whoever got it, very well written.
I said, do you want to be here for me?
Are you ready, Stacy? Yep. Okay, we'll let you run the show.
Yep.
Tell us about economic development.
There's nothing going on. So, wanted to kind of go over a couple things really quick, just a brief history. So I started in 2011, but there was a resolution in 2005 that was passed for incentives. They had guidelines presented and they allowed the town to go outside those guidelines to approve additional details, kind of much similar to what we have now if things come in. So when I came on in April of 2011, by October of 2011, we had formalized our guidelines, which we have now, and I will pass out. And those are started in 2012 as those guidelines. They allowed the town board again to go outside of the purview if they saw something like
the unicorn projects, right? Costco, Amazon, right? I mean, crazy stuff, right? So we can do that. So we had a modification to our incentive guidelines in 2016 for 2017. And we reviewed the existing incentives that we had. We maintained a case-by-case policy for retail. And then we did, we mentioned and talked about the trend and blanket incentive agreements that we did for the brands. But then we also, I recommended the removal of the raw water waiver because water was such an asset, and I just thought that's just, we cannot continue to waive that and not make people either buy it or secure it for us for our future. So that's kind of our history about how we got there. So our current guidelines, which are in your packet, and they're on our website, you've seen them, I'm sure, time and time again. So I'm not gonna read through all those, but those are currently what we offer. So,
Stacy, there wasn't anything in our packet for tonight.
no, it's right there.
Oh, this packet, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
packet, sorry.
We're not allowed to see it ahead of time.
Sorry, no, I had to finish this spreadsheet over the weekend.
I'm
and,
sorry, I just didn't know what packet you were referring to.
The one you just got, Paul.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine, sorry. We had development fees, personal property tax, expedited review, training dollars, all those different things that we had. And so what I did was kind of put together a spreadsheet that you see with about 9 other communities around here about what's going on with other communities, so you can see in comparison about what other communities do and what they do in accordance to kind of what we do and what we have done in our current plan. So you can kind of see as we go through this and talk about a little bit more in depth about the incentives and the programs that we have to offer. There are some things that were offered or that were in existence in other municipalities that we don't have, so keep these in the back of your mind if there's something you want to pursue. The other communities assist with other incentives, and these are all like literally in their incentives, in their programs that they have mostly on their website. So, but they offer PIF or TIF, and that's mostly in alliance with URAs, urban renewal areas. They offer assistance with metro districts, special improvement districts, public infrastructure they'll assist with. Loan funds, Greeley has a specific loan fund. They also have a water fund that they're doing some work with and offering water as an incentive. PABs, we do that as well though. Cash incentives, Loveland has that. And deferment of development fees until certificate of occupancy. And currently, Loveland and Greeley are the only 2 that have that. So instead of necessarily waiving them, or maybe they waive some, then they'll defer all of them due until certificate of occupancy. So I don't know how much they've utilized it. I know the last one Loveland did, I thought, was Orthopedic Center of the Rockies, and that one that they did. They also, most of them offer additional or different incentives for downtown development, much like us. We have our own entity that does the facade improvement program. Most all partner with regional state offices for additional incentive. Again, we kind of do that, but they actually have that written into their policy where they say that they partner with those, and then they list them out there. And then the two companies that do the economic impact, or the 3 entities that do the economic impact analysis model right now are Loveland, Johnstown, and Windsor. So those are the 3 entities that right now currently use the economic impact analysis model. There could be others that just wasn't listed or supported or talked about publicly. So other options that we can discuss if you want to, or should we choose to ebb and flow with this discussion about specific incentives. Road impact fees, however, keep in mind those are an enterprise fund, so should we choose to waive those, much like the sewer and the water, we would have to reimburse those out of the $200,000 economic development fund or the general fund, you know, which is basically backfilled by that and make whole every year from that fund. I've tried to run some stuff up the flagpole with Shane. We started talking about utility tax waivers, but I owe him a white paper and I haven't been able to complete that yet about the pros and cons. Been reaching out to other municipalities. It's not really anything that anybody has done before, but it's not an enterprise fund, wouldn't have to be backfilled. But I know with our poor Mr. Moyer who's been out, it's been hard to get some information and stuff, so I'm still working on that to see if there's any possibility for that. And then there's always manufacturing use tax or sales tax waiver, so we do charge that sales tax on manufacturing equipment, and I know there's been specific cases where they've gone in and people have appealed it. I believe Universal Forest Products might have been one, and some other ones where they kind of said, well, this piece of equipment is in conjunction that makes a product that gets taxed in the end. So it wouldn't be, it's part of a process that has a product that gets taxed in the end, so why are you taxing me on my equipment, kind of a thing. So that was, I think we've had some local cases like that where we've gone in on a case-by-case basis and waived it. It was all done prior to me being here or wasn't part of an economic development incentive package.
Stacy, before you jump off of that, I attended out at Budweiser, it was the manufacturing coalition group that was going through the United States, had me go, because they were presenting to Budweiser as they started and kicked off their tour. And they were going to like 13 states or all across the United States. But based on what they said, and manufacturing does tend to be a primary employer, if and when we do get them and they come, there is a huge need for jobs in the manufacturing spectrum. And do you think that we would be able to lure more of those here if we had other additional incentives, or do you think the incentives that we have, because, and I didn't bring my book that I had jotted down a bunch of notes because they didn't have a paper, so to speak, that they passed out, but they spouted all kinds of really good, solid information about how the manufacturing industry right now is really on the search and is gonna be a need of, like in the tens of thousands, I think 50,000 alone in Colorado, employees, and so I didn't know.
Yeah, so I was on the board of directors for the Northern Colorado Manufacturing Organization, and that served all of Larimer and Weld County, and I just got off of that. We have a large group of manufacturers in town, obviously, and they are so specific that it really depends. I think it's almost like a case-by-case basis, because you can have manufacturers that pay minimum wage, and you can have manufacturers that pay $75,000 a year per employee. So I think it really depends on the technological advancement of that manufacturing process, and if there's components that are involved where it's advanced manufacturing, then it might be a goal or a targeted industry that we do, and specifically say, advanced manufacturing that pay 150% above the county average, we're gonna incentivize you even more. Okay. Or whatever it is. And we usually talk, I think with what we have on the table and what we offer, it's usually, when you look at this and talk about it, so, in general, you can see we're pretty much in alignment with all the surrounding communities about what we offer. So if they're gonna come to Northern Colorado, I think we're pretty competitive from that standpoint. Okay. If we were specifically to go after some industries or something like that we wanted, then we might want to do that, but we're just so small from that standpoint. I think Greeley has it in their incentive program where they list, like, here's the only ones we're going to give incentives to, these companies or that fit in this particular industry. Well, they don't have enough workforce to supply those companies. I don't have enough workforce to supply those companies, and people aren't going to move here, or that talent is not going to move here if there's only one or two companies that are here for that. Fort Collins does that a little bit. Denver has a better luck with that. They have more bio firms, more aerospace, more different firms like that. So somebody can say, well, I'll move to Denver and I'll uproot my family and move there, because if that job falls through at that company, I've got 5 other that I can apply to that I know I can get a good job at. Or we just don't have that here. We don't have industry specific. We calculate ours based off of, are you providing benefits to your employees? Are you paying above the county average? Are you doing those things that would really generate wealth in a community and provide good jobs for us? So I think we're fairly consistent, but at the end of the day, it's really up to you guys about what you want to do and the direction you want to take. I think we've been pretty successful with the projects and the programs that we've had. As I was tracking this and calculating it out, I have stuff as far back as 2003 that we have done some incentives, but I was calculating all of this up. So I track all of this stuff about when the incentives go out. This highlighted in green means they're done. So we have done, since 2003, so it could be more, $9.1 million worth of incentives. Doesn't mean it's cash out the door, but it means that it's like either fee waivers or 50% sales tax, share back, or any of those things. But that has brought in $638 million worth of investment into the community. So that 9 million versus 638 million, so, you know, it's a pretty good ratio that we've done to be able to provide that much. And a lot of it has come from, I mean, even Owens is 145 million, Vestas or Front Range Energy was 10 million, Vestas was 81 million, Hexel was 10 million. That's the investment, the initial investment that they made at the time the incentive was offered. So we know that there's been ripple effects, and when you talk about manufacturers, there's a multiplier effect that I never bring up because you can't, it's not tangible. But with every manufacturing job, usually 1.5 other jobs are created at minimum, usually. It depends on the industry. If you're high advanced tech, you can have 2 jobs created because it's the wealth that's generated which allows those people to buy more services or do other things. They aren't always other high manufacturing jobs, they may be retail jobs, but they do cause a spin-off effect or another effect of creating more jobs and more wealth in the community. So, so we do kind of track that and we focus on those things, but we, our guidelines are fairly consistent with what everybody else is doing in the area. So, but it's really up to you guys if you see, Loveland again is the only one offering cash for jobs. And I don't know how often they're still doing it. They put $450,000 into their fund every year. Us and Loveland are the only ones that have these funds right now. I think Fort Collins has gotten rid of theirs. Excuse me, but they keep adding it. So they put 450 in every single year and they keep building it, and then they use it to do different incentives or different things. But what they were used to doing was paying like for jobs, and then they'd have to go count the end of year.
Right.
Do you still have these jobs? And if you kept them, and with this staff and time, I never have recommended that. We could do it, but it would be kind of crazy. And I don't like buying jobs. I want to do equal money in. If you're going to invest in our community, we're going to waive some fees for you, you know, kind of a thing, and we're going to be competitive that way, I think. So, other than that, you know, we really don't, we have some other options of things that we can look at, of some different things. If you guys no longer wish to backfill that $200,000 fund, or you're worried about water, sewer, and enterprise funds and having to backfill or those kind of things. But other than that, I think we're pretty competitive. I did throw this extra strategic plan in there too. This is not something we post because this is like our little thing that we do. And this is my little, what we focus on when that Economic Development Task Force gave us those 3 things to focus on, which was primary employment, retail, and business ombudsman. Then I wrote out the plan for how that gets done. And so that's just a reminder kind of in there about why we focus on those 3 things and what that does, what that takes to get those 3 things done. So I think I'll just kind of open this up to questions if anybody has any comments or wants to talk or, yeah.
For those other options, do companies ever come to you suggesting those, or like, hey, if you can do this, and
They've
what do you
requested-
say?
We don't do that. You know, I mean, it's, if it's something that was like a live or die, you know, I would go talk to Shane. I'd say, Shane, you know, look, they're coming at me and I've got to find a little bit of extra money.
Right.
We have done the road impact fee in the past. We did it for the hearth because it was a whole new level of open space that was existing building but had never been used. So they came, when they went to put that restaurant in there,
It was a big fee.
it was
right?
like, that's another $10,000 they weren't expecting. And so we did, on that particular case by case kind of situation, we said, yeah, we'll help waive that this time, and then we had to backfill it out of the general
So if
fund.
you think it's a worthy project, you'll still bring it to us, even if it's outside the.
The normal scope, yeah, and that's why these are just called guidelines.
Guidelines, yeah.
They're really, you know, they're trying to establish some, you know, minimum foundation of what people really need to bring to the table. You need to be making a significant investment in our community. You really need to be paying good paying jobs that are above the normal average jobs. You need to be paying healthcare so that, and the reason we do that is because then that frees up more money for them to go spend money on retail, which is sales tax dollar, which churns in our community. So if they have discretionary income to spend, it really circles back to benefit us as a whole, because those companies are paying good wages and those people can spend their money here too. So, yeah, so those have been brought up and mentioned. Not so much, mainly just the manufacturing use tax and the road impact fee. The utility one, I just started going down that path because it was not an enterprise fund, really. So I thought if it's an option for us, when we get in large manufacturers that use mass quantities of power, because we can't compete with Fort Collins, Loveland, Estes Park, and Longmont, because we don't have our own utility provider company. So that's where I get the conflict, and I hear back that people's utility bills are really, really high and expensive, which I think we're still pretty competitive, but against those other communities, we're not, because we don't own our own power companies. So the kilowatts per hour are higher here to do manufacturing processes than they are in those other communities. So I have had that as a kickback to us several times. And there's one company that's asked if we could help with it already. They're starting to move into their location in Windsor, and I don't want to talk about their name publicly just yet, but they're a high power user. And then I have a couple other that are trying to talk about going through expansions.
What about broadband? Does anybody bring up broadband as an issue?
Usually. I mean, I think they're all excited about it if it's there, but I think what's kind of cool is most of our business parks are pretty well lit. I think from that standpoint, there's some options there, and they have options to use that. I think when I did the Woodward project for us, I worked with CenturyLink to get them to pull fiber across the road to, and I think we waived some extra fees of some extra cost it was gonna cost for that, if I remember correctly.
And Shane and I sat in with Ello today, who's the provider in Fort Morgan, that Kevin Ross found for the broadband conversation that I started back in October. So we met with them today, we had a great meeting, and one of the things, I won't hold him to it, but one of the things he did say, one of the things they would bring to this community if they were involved here, is if we had a commercial player or some who wanted to come in, they would go to bat for us, and they'd make sure that they pull the fiber, or to where they needed to be.
So I just wonder if we're gonna
At no cost to
How do you
us.
spell it?
ALLO.
They get really good reviews for their service as well as their customer service when people have to call them.
Yeah, I'm gonna be concerned is when the new development comes in, because we've got
And
two
make sure
business
they've got
parks
really good customer service reviews.
that are almost full. And
Grease
so as we
fees.
start to develop some of those 7,000 other acres that may or may not have been developed but are identified in our land use comp plan, they may not have the infrastructure there. I worry about that from a competitive standpoint. We're not big enough to have a big tech industry or office industry yet. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would probably like it a lot better if they could get a
I just
faster
worry that
speed.
if we're the ones without it, a lot of home businesses that
That's true.
never, I don't know, just thinking,
Yeah.
at some point, Loveland and Fort Collins will have it and we won't.
Well, I
I don't know
think
if
though
that's
that we're looking
That's
at,
true.
I think
Yeah,
we've got
that's true.
an alternative option
No,
to bring into the
and that's the
table.
first time I'm hearing about it, but it's,
So-
they're, seem further down than we are.
That is true.
Which is
We
okay,
lose-
I'm not saying.
We lose a competitive.
Well, however,
Yeah.
these guys built up like Fort Morgan in 6 months. So when you bring them into the table, I mean, we would probably take longer because we're bigger than Fort
Yeah.
Morgan, but it's not gonna take years and years and years.
Right.
So we even joked about it today, that we would, maybe if we chose them, we would have it before Fort Collins.
Wow.
And they're I think they're out of Nebraska, aren't they?
They're Nebraska.
So they do like Lincoln, Nebraska, and some other towns. And I went out. I first heard about it, Christie, with your coffee with the mayor. Not this most recent one, but the month before. And so I went out and researched them. They look like a good option.
Yeah. So
So yeah, that's.
we'll bring more to you as soon as we get some more information together. We'll have actually a work session
Okay, good.
so that you all can hear and see what they're about.
Stacy, on it, sorry, Doctor.
Go ahead. No, just a real quick one. What do we, on the average, what do we shoot for as far as payback goes for all the incentives? I know you've given us presentations, anything from 13 months to 18 years. So,
Yeah,
What-
usually 10 years or less, but to our target, I usually try to go 5 years or less.
5 years or less.
Yeah. The 18 years are usually a special, that's like, I've only done, I think, one on that, which might have been High Hops, I think, is when I did. The mill was obviously a separate entity that was done in conjunction with the DDA. But yeah, usually, I just found out today too that the Starbucks that we did on Main Street was supposed to be in 1.36 years, and it was just under a year. It was paid back for the 61,000. So I'm, I try
You're
to.
welcome.
Yes, thank you, Miles. Because I always see there we're having meetings there. Not together, but we're like, hey, Miles, hey,
Yeah, Miles is probably on his own, I haven't, between him and Paul.
Paul, I think.
Yeah. So that's usually.
Paul was there when I saw you there.
They did it together.
5 or less.
Yeah.
We
I
did about
try-
2.5 to 3 years, so I remember.
I usually try to do 3 or less, but 5 years is usually what it was set on. Is anything 5 years or less is usually a pretty good payback. Yeah, for us. And then I try to, I'm trying to figure out how to disseminate that information more effectively, and as well as, like I mentioned the last time, I get asked for incentives with almost every single company. Every single company. And you guys see me when I come forward asking for incentives, but you don't see the ones that I turn down. So I've got like 3 or 4 right now, and Shane and I are working on that to how do we disseminate that information to keep that confidentiality, but still let you know what industries are asking or looking, and maybe why we turned them down. So you know, and because I've got one that we talked about incentives that we laid everything out, and then they shifted from owning to now leasing, and I'm like, wait a minute. But it's such a unique project that nobody else is ever gonna lease that building if they build it. So it's like they're gonna buy it, but their books, the way that they do stuff, they don't wanna buy it and lock in all their working capital. So it's an interesting, unique thing like that, but.
Yeah, just on that second bullet point, just because I'm not sure I understand it, but if somebody moves in and they're a customer of Puda REA, and they're buying whatever, billions of kilowatts, and their electricity bill is $20, we tax that?
3.95%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same with Atmos or whatever gas?
Any of them, yeah. So it's all gas and electric. So Excel, Puder Valley, REA, Atmos, all of it gets charged 3.95. Obviously, the 0.95 would not be opportunity to have that shared back. And I wouldn't even recommend giving it all up. I would say maybe it's a share back or a portion or something, but Shane and I need to have a more in-depth discussion about that and see what's really feasible because of the tracking of it, the monitoring of it, the costs of what it would be for staff to have to do all of that stuff. I haven't fully vetted it, but it's an option.
And I even think, you know, on the utility bill, let's say it's 10,000 a month, or I don't know what it is, but what's, if we're gonna share back 2% of that, is it gonna be enough to move the needle anyway?
Yeah.
And say, well, instead of 10,000, your bill's only 9,900 now, we're waiving the tax. I just, that's what we need to
Is it
research
gonna-
it more to see, is there enough there to really do something with, is it meaningful?
Yeah. So
And rates in other communities are significantly lower?
that's what they tell me.
Well, I
but
think
it's
what they can do.
What, our utility rates?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what you
The
say, yeah.
electric is just
Electric?
well, and it's just in those communities.
They can negotiate those, because they own that utility.
Oh, I see.
They can say, you know, we're gonna do
Oh,
a
I
bulk
see.
power, we'll do it
Okay.
for 15 cents a kilowatt or
Okay.
whatever, so I think that they just have the ability to do that. I don't know if
So
on
it's insane.
paper they're any less than our providers.
Okay, I was
But-
wondering, you know.
They're more flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even Loveland owns a lot of their own water infrastructure too, so they can do a lot of stuff with water too. Which I'm surprised I didn't really see a lot of that in their incentive, but they've got a big chunk of money that they put in their account every year, so.
You mentioned workforce, and it made me think, not so much in terms of incentives, but a short while ago, I saw a thing that Greeley had established a apprentice-type program with Vestas. So the Greeley school districts were linking some of their kids over to Vestas to start apprenticing them into semi-skilled labor, right? So I wonder if we have somebody coming in, because to your point, if you don't have the educator or the workforce they need, they're not gonna move here. But if we're close, could we develop these internship programs or something, or apprenticeship programs to say, you know,
Yeah.
we'd love you here and we'd love you to establish connections
The future
with
workforce.
Ames, or,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
with Ames or otherwise to train you.
So we do that, on a couple different ways. the manufacturing partnership that I mentioned, so that serves all of northern Colorado, there's apprenticeships through there, through the high school, and so they come in and they go into the high school and talk about it. Then they pull the high school students out and tour manufacturing facilities. So they do have those programs. There's scholarships for kids, on the high school kids to go to college, to go and learn these trades or get the certificate. So the manufacturing partnership, which is really the sector partnership that was started at the state level, is really our main go-to for that. We also use the workforce centers with Vestas for screening applicants, and they can pay like an extra $25, and then they screen these applicants or make them take the tests, so that the company itself saves money, not having to go through all these applications if they don't even meet the minimum qualifications. So there's that. And then we partner with Ames Community College on the Weld side and Front Range Community College on the Larimer side. The state has a program called Colorado First and existing training grant programs. So they work with existing industry to retrain them if a new piece of equipment comes on, or if they have to do a new hiring, if they really expand and they need to train this workforce who has no idea what to do, they'll train them and pay basically their salary almost, or a matching grant to pay them to train on that new equipment. And we have that in our program too, where we'll help pay up to $10,000 to help with training grants too in our incentives. I'm gonna say this, and that's gonna jinx me, right? We've never used it since I've been here, because I'm lucky enough to get them in with Ames or get them a grant through there, and they're happy with getting half of it paid for through that program. And they can reapply for that every 2 years. So that state program, really trying to pull money up north I worked really hard when I worked at a regional EDO and quadrupled the amount of money we were getting up north by existing industry and just telling them about that. So there's always more that can be done, and even with school districts like District 6 that does scholarships for kids in Greeley and those kind of things too, there's always more they can do. I found out some of the problems, much like some of the other advisory board things that you've mentioned, is they have to be 18 to be on the floor for manufacturing facilities. They have to be of age, and so it can become a liability issue if they're too young to actually be on the floor. But we found with the tours it's okay, because they can get them interested in it and let them know that there's good paying jobs out there in several different categories or several different types of manufacturing, where they aren't physically working on the floor and getting.
If we have a primer coming in that's promising 100 new jobs or something, are we allowed, I guess legally, to say we want 25% of those to be Windsor residents?
You can. You can put that in your code if that's something you choose to do. Windsor's so unique, and it's been difficult in the past because of the shortage of workforce housing and because of the higher priced of our housing. It's been a little bit difficult, and I haven't recommended we do that in the past. Right. But all within Weld County is not a bad idea if they're in Weld, or making sure. I know that there's Weld County itself does
or
that.
Larimer County.
Well, or Larimer County.
Lots of miles and I look at each
other. So, I was thinking Vestas specifically, but I know when Weld County does their 50% personal property tax rebate, because they are usually fantastic about jumping on with us to do that. They have a stipulation that says at least X amount of percentage of those have to be from that county, that business.
It's probably more appropriate. Yeah, we don't have.
Just is for us, I think, until we get a little bit more, maybe.
No.
But yeah, and I don't really want to. I can track it, I guess I could, but I don't really want to rip. You know what I mean? That's a lot of like tracking and trying to do the data on that and going in and asking for that to try to track it. We just have such a small staff, it can become cumbersome to try to do that. But really, again, it's up to your guys' discretion about what you choose to do, and if that's the path you want to take, we can write that in.
Sounds burdensome on the company as well. Like, oh god, I gotta find someone from Windsor to fulfill my 25th person. Someone left, I gotta find them from Windsor.
Well, and they haven't had, the workforce option, has been so small anyway to choose from. I think at this point in time, you wouldn't want to dictate it has to be now from a specific area necessarily.
Well, and that's why I applaud you guys talking about, and I constantly am touting that you guys are focused on roads, water, sewer. Because that and the mobility that we have in Windsor and the ability for people, goods and services to get in and around Windsor is so vital because we don't have that workforce. But I keep touting it and saying, you know, Biz West, I was giving y'all a shout out. I said, and our elected officials focus on, you know, infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, because that is valid when companies think about coming there. And 48% of the workforce from Vestas comes from non-Windsor Larimer County. That means they're driving all the way through town to get over there. So that's just as important as incentives, is focusing that money on putting money into those infrastructure needs, not only for existing people and businesses here, but for the future, because we know it's coming, right? So it's I tout that all the time and say, you know, Windsor is really leading the charge and making sure that we're effective in those infrastructure needs, and this is our strategic plan, and this is what our town board did, and so I talk about that all the time because I think it's a valid incentive.
Does anyone in offering these programs require self-reporting on the part of the recipient?
The state does when you get state incentives from that standpoint. When we do on personal property tax rebates, they have to report back to me and give me their paid property tax bill, and then we reimburse 50%. So I don't have to track that. Now, when some of the fees we waive up front, and then some of them, now Ian and Kim are writing in there, they have to provide me with a copy of their certificate of occupancy, because the database that we have doesn't notify me every time it goes out. And then if I have only, I mean, it sounds silly, but if I have 60 days to only get a check written and get their other fees reimbursed to them, it sounds like a long time, but at first we were only doing 30 days, and that's, if I don't know for 2 weeks, and then I've got to get them a check cut, and then I've got, you know, so I'm now writing in there that they have to report, you know, when do they get their certificate of occupancy, so that it's minimal, it's not as invasive as counting heads or making sure my zip codes match, but it's still accountable to them to say, hey, you've got to provide me with this information. And we've done that with HIHOPs too. So from a sales tax standpoint, they have to show me, you know, I've got the basic core of all the receipts that they spend on all that money, but they have to show me that they've paid their taxes and show me that they've paid their property taxes, and I check with our finance department to make sure all of they're not in arrears, and then we rebate that for their incentive.
How long was their rebate for?
Until 400,000, 350,000.
Oh, just a certain
cash.
amount.
I think it goes up to 10 years, or I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look. Well, let me see. I don't think I have the details in
That's
there.
okay.
I was gonna say I can.
They're probably outperforming what we anticipated.
Probably, looking good here.
It seems like almost every business.
Yeah, you guys go to your Starbucks, I'm the one holding.
Yeah, right.
You're doing the beer, you and Shane, going to my house, holding down the fort.
You already come to think.
Yeah.
What's that?
Aren't we overdue?
I've been meaning to hit trivia night. That's the library's biggest event, is the HIHOPS event.
I guess, Stacy, just to keep that in the back of your head, to the extent we have an incentive program that's combined of various elements, and if it is headcount or jobs, or things that I've heard you in the past say, I can't get that information to really truly track it. Is it something we can impose on the recipient to say, I'm not asking for your personal, private, you know, whatever, trade information, but I'd like you to prepare for me a report.
We could, yeah, we could, and it also, it depends, like to Miles' point, it depends on the size of the company and if it's cumbersome for them or if it's not too detailed, but I think we do require them to report to us on some of those stuff. Like there's a company that I will not mention, but they haven't gotten their 50% personal property tax rebate for 2 or 3 years because they haven't come back to it. Now, they switched ownership group and we modified it and made sure that they signed the correct papers, and we've told them about it, but I'm not chasing people down to give them money. If they don't come after what they agreed upon,
Put some tape over that.
that's fine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, that's just the way, we don't have, you know, we're so busy and we're very fortunate to be this busy. We really are. But you know, maybe in a slower time, I would have more time to go do that, but I'm not gonna give away money if they're not gonna come get it. They got the award, they know about it, we've done our due diligence, and I'm not gonna track them down to.
So they'll come back and want all of that.
I don't believe they can, so, yeah, but,
Well, there's probably a time Isn't there a limitation, say to do
Yeah,
it within
it's
X amount of
it's-
years, or they might be?
The state
Yes,
limits
well.
us to 50% in 10 years, I think, is what it has. Yeah. I think at one point the state went up to 75%, but I can't remember for sure. But I've never recommended more than 50% of personal property tax rebate. There was one community that does real property as well, which kind of surprised me. That was Thornton. So they do personal property and real property tax abatement on there. So that's an option too. But right now I see us as pretty competitive. I mean, we could always do more if you guys decide there's industries that you want to go after or different things like that. But I don't know. I haven't been turned away to a certain extent on a company that I really wanted, that has, that I thought would have been a really good fit, that just said, Stacy, you're not giving me enough money. I have not really been turned away. There was one company that did, and they got $5 million from another Colorado community, and then they folded within 2 years, and I went.
Okay. That's
So,
my question,
I-
if we had lost businesses or something that we were not doing, that maybe you thought we should.
I mean, there's some, we can talk about Smuckers, but that's a whole nother deal.
Well, that was a different, that was a.
That's a whole nother
that was-
dynamic that was
right,
out of our control.
That wasn't our,
It
that
wasn't our
issue.
fault,
Right,
no, we did our part, we
Okay.
stood up, we crunched the numbers, we did everything we could above and beyond.
right.
And we thought outside of the box, we did everything we could
Right.
do for that, and it ended up being a
Right.
different issue,
Right.
so.
Is there anything we're absolutely pursuing right now? I mean, we obviously hear from residents what they want, where they want it, but, but a lot of that's dependent on that company wanting to come here and
Yeah, there's so
approaching
many
us.
dynamics with retail, that's the
Yeah.
funky part,
But
is
do we
that-
ever go out and like pursue anybody though? I mean,
Oh,
have
Stacy's
we?
pursuing them all the time.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
goes out.
My philosophy is this, as a salesperson for Windsor, the answer is always no unless you ask. So I am never afraid to pick up the phone and call anybody, track them down, hunt the people down in Wyoming for steak and ribs. But we will, I don't ever hesitate if you have an idea or you hear something. It's not a good philosophy to maintain our whole program on that, and that's why, working with Shane and stuff, we've talked about the whole retail, and working with Katie Press and getting this whole foundational built on all of these retail areas so that we're really designing an area that's desirable for them to be at. So we're cutting our workload by tons by being able to provide an area where they already want to be. We've made that check, we've got the space, check, you've got the location, perfect, so
If
that's.
you think about it this way, like when we think about, geez, we'd love to have, an In-N-Out burger here and look at whatever reasons to have that. And retailers, they look at set things, is the zoning right, is the corner right? How many people live within this distance? And so really that's the work with Katie Press, is us going and doing all these things and checking the boxes for the retailers versus having, Stacy go and,
Dial for dollars.
Yeah, dial them up.
Dial for dollars.
So we can be a lot more proactive. So I think it's just, it's worthwhile. We still have a lot of good commercial areas that haven't really developed that much. So that's the good news, while our neighbors have brought in a lot of retail, they've also filled in a lot. And we have, I think, a lot of potential for some really great retail.
And we can get those areas identified and presentable, then we can go to the ICSC events in Vegas and we can say, look what we've got, here's not only one option, but 2 or 3 that you could locate in. Those kind of things that provide them with more opportunities. I went the first year I was here, I'll be here 8 years, April 1st, I haven't gone back because I'm not gonna spend money to go do that if it doesn't make sense. It's just like, throwing stuff up into the wind and hoping something sticks, it's just not a good spend of our money, I don't think that way, so, but, it's coming for us, and I'm never afraid to call, so if you hear of anybody or have friends that have chains or anything, also the unique thing, like Shane mentioned, is the franchisee may have the right to develop here, but they just don't want to. So it's always that component, that emotional factor that you're like, oh, we're so awesome.
Well, perfect.
Why don't you want to be here? And then you look at it, you're like, come on, let's just land here. And but it's that factor that I can't figure out or wave my magic wand.
You had mentioned once, I think, that the kind of population level, or maybe it was that retail consultant was saying 50,000 is kind of the number where people want to see your community. And that's one of the tensions. You see everybody on next door saying, I want this and this and this.
Right.
You say,
But
well,
not
you
all
get
the
it
people,
if
yeah.
you're 700,000
Right.
people. Oh, wait, no, I don't want that. So is 50 still kind of a target for, I guess, retail?
Probably for most, we're starting to turn some heads, I think, just because of our growth, but yeah, 50,000, and it depends. It's now for a big box, which aren't even really even developing. I know, that people are concerned about the Walmart site when I made a comment about, well, we hope to get, you know, another big
Right.
box in there, because that's what it's designed for, the sewer capacity, everything is
Right.
designed for that.
Right.
And they said, well, I hope you don't go after those, we don't want big boxes, and I was like, well, don't worry about it, they're not even building right now. But that wasn't my response. My response was just, I understand your concerns and thank you for letting me know, but we're just not even building. The big boxes just even aren't
Sure.
out there anymore. But those are 75,000 to 100,000 people now to get a big box. It's doubled in what it used to be for the
Yeah, Sears.
requirement. Sears.
Tracy Benz.
So,
Anything else?
Well, I was just gonna say, Sissy, one other question I had, from, I think it was David, a while back is, so when we bring these incentives to the board, you just kind of show up in executive session, hand everything out, number them, look them in the eye when we hand them out. Is there any way to do that different? Is there any way to have like the board sign a general NDA
Oh, I see.
and give it to them, like when we set out the regular board packet? Can we put something like we do in executive session where they get it, it's confidential, or are the rules against that? Because I didn't really have a good answer for him when he'd asked me that
you
question.
mean like ahead of the game so they can
That's
look at it
right.
besides
That's
just
right.
bringing it on?
It's in a red packet with a lock on it, sealed.
I know
It's
you love
courier
spraying it on
with
us,
handcuffs.
but
Yeah.
it would be nice.
I bet with email though, that would be hard to.
Email.
Right, well, I just, but we put out other things through executive session though,
Security,
that,
right.
that are secure, that really.
Let me talk to Ian and Kim about that offline and see if there's a method that we can come up with that. Because I don't see any reason why there wouldn't be any issue doing that. I just have to know the legal ease of it. And because we always tell the companies too that everything is confidential and it's in a confidential meeting, and then we pull all that information back and shred it until they're ready. So,
Yeah, maybe even if it was a hard packet and something that we just delivered to their houses, and then they just, after the meeting, they hand it back into us and we still have all that information back.
Well, they can come pick it up and secure.
Yeah, if we don't bring the snacks, I guarantee at least 2 of them will eat them before.
totally different. So, let me
Senate has a
work
packet with a lock
with you
on it,
on that and you and
handcuffs,
Ian and
you
see
can't-
how we can disseminate that information a little bit easier and that you can digest it, cause
But
I
some
know.
of these, I mean, I can
Well,
see
we
like
had
when
to
it's
sign
these bigger packets, but some of them are
Right.
4 or 5
Have
pages
security
too.
clearance.
And that's
So,
another thing that we talked
I'm
about
not
too
sure.
is, go ahead, sorry.
I mean, like some of the ones that Jill has just brought to us, they were fairly small, and I don't know that we need to see that on all of them all the time, and, I mean, you go into the weeds too much, little buddy.
That's where the bugs live. That's where the nasty stuff.
If you're messing, we're just gonna go.
Anyway, we'll look into that. If there isn't a legal issue, I think from a staff standpoint, if it just sends somebody out to deliver a packet, we don't do these that often, and we can figure it out. It's really about, I think the board, we're asking to make these decisions, they're important decisions. I appreciate how much you rely on staff to do our due diligence and everything else, but if you've had a few more days to look at it and feel more comfortable with the information, it's, I don't think there's a loss there if we can do it.
Right, yeah, I mean, they are usually in alignment with the policy that you guys
Right.
have approved, but I understand that sometimes people wanna have a little bit more time with them, so.
Not some people.
Thank you for saying it in such a general term.
I'm not
Anyone else?
Some of the larger ones, I'd like to see it.
Did you have anything else?
Little ones?
No, unless you guys,
If you study the
if you're
little
comfortable
ones,
with
you can
everything,
adjust
we'll
it.
just
You
look
adjust
into
it.
that
Right.
and
And the
then,
bigger ones are just bigger numbers.
kinda
Right.
keep moving forward.
Same concept.
And then you sent out an email today, right? Do we have, I think you sent out to the whole town board about the upcoming,
Economic impact analysis.
Right,
So
yes.
David Hansen is going to do a webinar for us, And I sent him the Bobcat of the Rockies economic impact analysis and said, this is what might be a good example to go through. He's gonna do kind of like behind the curtain are the magic numbers, so you can see where all the data comes from. And then they'll start the revamp, I think, in April of putting our new budget numbers in to the system. And so because our economic impact analysis is not just what the company will create, it is what does it cost the town, and it's based off of our budget numbers. So it's really what it does cost the town and what we provide, and so we're gonna update that every year now, so we're up to speed or current with what, so as soon as the budget gets passed or approved in December, we'll get them on it, they get the new numbers going, so that we're running something that's valid with what it really is costing us to provide services. So.
Cool. So we're gonna be on speakerphone and he's gonna be.
He's gonna do a webinar, go-to webinar, so yeah.
We'll be sitting here.
Yeah.
Or we could be sitting at home.
Yes, you could if you prefer, but if you have questions that might be good for the group or something, or it might
Yeah,
be good to.
do it, yeah.
Do I need to bring snacks, would that help?
In and out,
Did
in
you
and
say
out
snack or
burgers.
six-pack?
Six-pack, oh no, it's only in the middle of the day.
Bring some in and out burgers.
Crunchy by the speaker.
Yeah,
That's
oh,
gonna be
it's
a fun
1 to
one.
3, it's after 12, it's okay.
Happy hour.
I'll
Oh,
ask
it's Friday
Shane.
too.
Somewhere.
I'll ask Shane.
Maybe snacks. But yeah, I think it'd be better if we just reserve this room, the second floor, and just have it up on the big screen and.
Yeah, I had to reserve this room because there was something else on the second floor,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Thank you for setting that up.
Yeah,
Look forward to it.
absolutely, and we're just, I can't imagine it would go more than 2 hours, but, yeah, he's a
Well,
good guy.
And Stacy, let's see if we can actually switch to get the second floor, because I think we'd be better off projecting on that smart board, because it's just such a bigger screen.
Okay,
So I don't
I'll
know.
see if I can switch, it's Judy's retirement party.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes.
Well, never
So-
mind.
Oh,
We'll just
that's
sit,
that.
we'll sit around
That's,
that.
that's.
It's just
fine.
that I find these screens kind of hard to see, and that one up there is so big, you can definitely get into the
That's,
data.
I looked at that, and I was actually surprised we weren't doing it on the first floor, but maybe they thought, maybe didn't want the,
Well, I think
It's too loud.
similar to the last retirement party, they can really decorate it
Oh,
up there
okay,
and
they're
make
doing
it a
the whole
little
hallway.
bit more
Okay.
versus having
I see.
kind of weird public interaction down here.
yeah,
Um,
I get it, okay, yeah, so that's what's kind of going on, so.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for all you
Thanks,
do.
Stacy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So then our next item on the agenda is something that was brought up a couple weeks ago, and now we have 2 things for consideration actually, and not one. So there's a letter concerning a resolution with the ZEV mandate, and then there's actually a letter, let's see. Did you, you sent that letter out earlier today, it's not included in this packet.
It is not.
Yeah, and that's just, and I did sign that letter, the letter against the 181, as the mayor, as many other mayors in our region are doing, and county commissioners and other folks.
I have a question. How do we come up with these resolutions that have come before us? Because we've never done this before, since I've been on the board. So this is kind of a new thing with the, I think 112 was kind of our first foray into.
Oh, we did them before,
Did we?
with the school, we've had some with the school board that have come before us, with the school district and stuff. So this came
For
from,
those state issues.
came out of MPO, out of the MPO council. And I will be testifying, on this ZEV, because MPO is going to, on the ZEV, because MPO is going to, get status for that, along with Weld County is claiming status as well, and I'm gonna be providing testimony as well.
Okay.
So, out of that, many of those folks, just like the letter today, they asked, would your boards sign as well as, so.
Okay. Because I was,
So, I mean, generally, your question, I would say, I can't speak to past history, but I would say anybody on the board, if anybody said, hey, look, this is a good bill, this is a bad bill, this is something I think we ought to consider, I think as staff, I would forward it to the whole board with your email and say, hey, look, my house would like us to consider supporting or whatever with the board, so that's kind of been how we've done this since I've been here.
Well, and the ZEV one isn't really against or for it, it's just citing that there are concerns and
Right.
issues, so it's not really a for or against, it's, in premise, there are some good things in there, but there's a lot of concerns about the way it's being positioned. And I don't think it's been, quite frankly, it's not been well thought out.
Well, I don't agree with all these bullet points. Like, it just seems like they're making some assumptions about, obviously the first one is a great point. But the second one, cost of the ZEVs will go up to support the purchase.
I don't know.
That's already, we saw studies and statements.
But I'm just thinking
that
economies of scale, and as businesses get more efficient, the prices will come down. Everything comes down. Computers have come down. I mean, as companies get better at this.
Well, no,
And-
this is the cost of non-ZEVs, meaning
Cost of
gasoline.
non-ZEVs.
Yeah, so they will go up.
Non-ZEVs.
And even the Colorado Department of Health who presented that did tell us in their studies that those costs will be going up. You'll be
Okay.
paying $5,000 to $6,000 more per vehicle.
See, I didn't hear that, I heard more like 1,000 per vehicle, so I don't know, I haven't seen, I'd wanna see the study, I guess.
So.
But is that, if you're going to an electric vehicle, is the cost of a gas vehicle your concern?
Yeah,
I
but,
guess.
well, this is from the automobile dealers who are gonna have to be selling these cars and have to apply the credits. And they are the ones who are saying they are going to have to increase their cost for these non-ZEV cars, $5,000 to $6,000.
Yeah, I
In
mean, I
order
haven't
to
seen that,
stay
that's
and
different than what
maintain
I've seen.
competitive in the marketplace, which is, they also have a lawsuit bearing right now.
And what's the point about impact on county clerks has not been assessed? What does that mean?
So because of when you have to get your licenses and everything, they're making this, they're gonna have this whole big thing where if you go out of state, because there's a concern that many folks will cross state borders, but they actually haven't done they haven't completed an impact economic study at all on the economic impacts that this will do. That's a very small one, I think, but.
Because the wrong one is attached, so I couldn't even read.
The packet had the wrong one, I went out and printed the right one, so I have it, but it had a old Hickenlooper.
No, this is, Hickenlooper is the one who signed it in
Well, the
initially.
executive order, it says
The 2019
October 8,
02
2019.
is Pulse.
But
So there was a different one, so the resolution says Executive Order B 2019-02.
Yeah, there's,
And so that's a Polis. There was another electric vehicle one.
right, there's two different, there's the
There's
low
two.
emission
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the zero emission. There's
Hickenlooper
two
signed it
different ones,
before
right.
he left.
Yeah.
Right, the Polish
Oh.
adopted his own.
Yeah.
Right, and then Polis did the zero.
Yeah.
I think there's, there can be some questions about the verbiage and so forth. The key thing for me, though, is it talks about a phased-in approach to implementation, which I think makes a lot of sense, and so from that standpoint, I'm okay adding my name to the letter if that's what we need to do. I think it's the absolute right direction. I think we've got serious concerns about air pollution, and so it's a good thing to start moving in this direction, but it does need to be phased in. And I agree, there's a lot of state that needs to be done yet. And some numbers here, I mean, 940,000 vehicles, you were saying, we don't know, I don't know what percentage of vehicles we have in Colorado right now.
15,000.
We have 15,000, so that's
That's a huge increase in 11
well, it's
years.
less than 10%.
Yeah.
It's about 8% over 11 years. That's maybe doable, I don't know. But I think that's why, the key phrase for me was phase it in.
But isn't phased in?
It is phased in
It's not next year, it's.
by 2030.
By
No,
2030. I don't know what
when
the
they create
benchmarks are.
yeah.
I don't know what the benchmarks are on
I
the
think
way.
Weld County would like
And that's the
to
problem I have
have,
with a lot of these
yeah,
things, there's a lot of detail that I don't know.
more-
So it's hard for me to say yes or no, because the bugs are in the weeds or the devil's in the details, you know what I mean? There's a lot of
You're gonna put your
information
name
I
on
don't
something.
know. I think it's the right direction though,
Right.
but obviously it's gotta be done.
Well,
with
and
some
you got,
thought. It's gotta be
when
done
these
with
go
some-
down there,
Yeah.
and the numbers they go down, they're not gonna read every single one and every single bullet. All they're gonna say is, they're really gonna just look at the first thing that says, where it basically stands, and these go in this pile, these go in this pile, here's who's gonna testify before it.
So
They're not gonna
we've got
read
piles
all
of
of
letters
these.
every day, and
Yeah.
that's how we organize them by files and.
So, I talked to Dale Egan, who's someone in Windsor who drives a Chevy Bolt, so I called him up with all this about like the lack of charging stations. I mean, one of the things that caught me, and I mentioned this last time briefly, was, kind of referring to this as rural areas with lower household incomes. Number one, I don't think that's Windsor. We have rural parts, I guess, but we're not a rural community. And so, talking to him, you know, about it, okay, he's like, we go to Rocky Mountain National Park, he goes, I go to Denver on a regular basis in his electric car. He goes, I have an app, he goes, it tells me where all the charging stations, there's more coming all the time.
Right.
And so he's like, you can live, work, and play here with electric vehicle, there's
Right.
plenty of charging stations. We even had one at the rec center, he said he doesn't use it because he doesn't see it as the town's responsibility to pay for his electricity. I asked him about charging it, he said he put a $500 charging port, like a 220, whatever it is, yeah, in his house, but he said you don't have to do that, you can charge it off 110.
Right.
And then there's a more expensive, you can charge them in like 1 hour off these DC rapid charge stations that are around about. He said because they're really concentrated on the interstates. I remember at CML, when Hickenlooper was there, he talked about what they were doing along the interstates, not just Colorado, but the surrounding states. But, I mean, so I didn't agree with that point. So I guess the question is, I'm not inclined to sign this for many reasons. And I did go and read the entire executive order. So we can go two ways. People can sign it, you know, as the mayor or a town board member if they want. I'm choosing not to. I'll debate with you all night long
But it
if you
could
want.
be, if it's the consensus of the board, if there's a majority of the board who wants to sign it.
I don't think so.
Who fills the names, and it could be from the
I
board.
don't agree.
Because there's not even I talked to somebody who works in this business. There's an impracticality to this whole mandate. The grid system cannot even accommodate the mandate that they're mandating that number. The grid system is not even near to being able to handle
It would be by
that
2030.
capacity.
They would add charging stations as they add cars.
No, it's not, I'm not even talking about the charging stations, I'm talking about, even if they created that many charging stations, the electrical grid patterns cannot handle that amount of electric vehicles in this state.
So,
It's
I
an
mean,
impractical, and I think mainly what folks just wanna say from the MPO side is that they need it, all these things they kind of just push through without hearing the other side, giving it any serious consideration. And at the same time, we have these big transportation gaps yet that we're trying to figure out, because roadways are still gonna be important. We still gotta figure out how we're gonna fix roads. And a lot of that has not been even addressed here yet in this situation.
you'd have to convince me that the power grid would not
Yeah,
handle
that's-
this. I haven't seen that, I went out and researched this. I didn't see or hear that anywhere.
Then what's the process? Do we vote on this and then it comes from the whole board if it passes, or is it just people choose to sign or not to sign?
It could.
And I think you sign
If
or
there's,
don't
if there's
sign.
folks who want to have it come from the board.
I don't want it to come from the board.
Yeah, I don't think, listen, I don't think it should probably come to the board. I don't think we have, one might have 4, I don't know. We only got 6 of us here. But I think, it's probably better to do it individually.
Letters.
One thing I worry about if we do pass this, and everything in here might be absolutely correct, but public perception. Oh, the Windsor Town Board just passed a resolution opposing zero emissions. And the average Joe isn't gonna read all these details, they're just, that's what they're gonna hear.
Yeah.
Well, I could tell you though, most of the folks, the communities in Weld County stand opposed to this and are gonna be signing on to this.
Has anybody signed it yet? I mean, because
So-
11 states have taken on what the governor's doing, correct? We're the 11th state to do something like this? Is my understanding? I could be wrong. I don't know if any other communities signed on to this yet? Is it
But
board?
it's not like we're signing on against the zero emissions. We're just saying we need to really think about how we're bringing this into
It's a statement.
into the plate. That's all it is.
It's a statement against zero emissions, that's the way I take it.
No.
I don't agree with everything in it.
It's not against.
It looks to me like it's written by Gas Norm.
Zero. No, they did not. Yeah, this was written by MPO. It was written by the MPO.
Okay.
It was not written by
Which included all
oil
the
and gas
columns,
folks.
all the northern region. One of the big concerns for me is and I'm really supportive of moving in this direction, but the tax issue. We have not raised the fuel tax in Colorado for what, 25 years or whatever. And we have a $10 billion need for highways and less than 1 billion.
Right.
And so we've got some, I don't know the answer to this because the two ballot issues both failed. And as we move toward lower emission cars, more fuel efficient cars, electric, we're compounding the financial problem too. So this really does, it's the right direction to go, but it takes a lot of thought. And that's why the phrase that caught me was somehow we're gonna phase this in. Because there's a lot of factors I think have to be dealt
We
with.
should have taken a position on the bonds last year.
I know where I voted, but,
Yeah, I mean, so that, that's all it's saying is,
yeah.
whoever's signing
But obviously
on
it's
is
not-
asking for a phased approach
Yeah.
to the implementation.
Yeah. But I think obviously we
It's
don't
not
have-
saying we're against, we're not against, it's saying we want more time to be able to make these considerations.
But I don't think we have a board, a total board commitment on the letter. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, you know where I'm gonna come out.
Yeah.
I think fruits and vegetables are the only thing good coming out of California. So my problem with the letter is it says to phase it in, as opposed to just
Not doing it.
terminate. It's an executive order. The next governor will come along with an executive order.
Yeah.
Executive wisdom.
The other way.
I mean, we know we're gonna have to live with it, but we're just saying we want some other considerations here.
Part of the answer to
And
this is for the NPO to have status.
it
Is that part of the
helps,
answer?
it helps when we're going down to testify,
Yeah.
to say, because that's, who we're testifying for and what those concerns are. The biggest concern that MPO had was that the state has not even done a economic impact study as to what they're telling us to do here, how that's going to economically impact our transportation budget and what that does. I mean,
And I
how can
understand
you tell us that this is what we need to do when you haven't even examined that?
And I understand leadership. I mean, I think we talked about, Kennedy said we're gonna go to the moon. We have no idea how to do it. Of course, we spent $100 billion to do it, but
Yeah, but you
sometimes
can't
set
even
a
build,
goal.
we can't even
We
build
You set a goal and then you start.
a
figuring
road
out-
out here and a second lane without doing an impact study. So I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So, and that's what, $1 million, so you can't spend $1 million on a road without having to go jump through all these
Well, I
hoops
think
to
the
create
point
their
that-
impact
I think it's
studies.
a good direction, and I think having the NPO involved, because we gotta bring people along, okay? Because there's gonna be some people who don't think it should happen at all, some people think it, yes, but Weld County particularly is gonna have a lot of issues.
I mean, we
So
have
we gotta do
folks,
this in a way that
we have
can bring
folks who are
people on board.
100% in support of this.
Mhm.
We're still gonna sign this because they believe that
It
it
needs to
should
be
be
phased
phased
in,
in
right.
and everybody should have their opportunity to still voice whatever
And to
concerns
Miles'
they
point,
have.
we don't know what phased in means, because it says 2030, that's 11 years down the road,
Phased
so
in.
obviously it's phased in, but it's
And if the
sustainable.
grid isn't there in 11 years, they're gonna have to change the executive order, so.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
True.
So I think individually we do what we need to do.
I just, when I looked at it, I was asking myself, where does this benefit Windsor residents by me voting for this? And I didn't see a benefit.
That was a
Well-
more almost philosophical question to your point.
Right.
Is our function here in Windsor to care about the impact of the whole state? Or do we really just say, no, what's the impact of our community?
So when I talked to Dale, one of our residents, about his car, he's like, why are you guys even talking about this?
Right.
Because,
But if I call my brother-in-law in Baca County, I know what he's gonna say.
right?
Yeah.
So what? Do we have a role here to consider statewide impact, or is it just, no, all we're concerned is Windsor? Because if you do that, I think it's harder to argue.
Mhm.
I'll still sign my own, I'll drop my own letter. It says,
Your letter could say no.
I mean, it's just.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and then we had another one come out about 181 as well,
So
which was sent today.
Yeah, and so I forwarded that to the entire board, and I think I've heard back from everybody. So we had, David, you said it doesn't go far enough.
Well, the biggest thing I said was if, it doesn't go far enough because as drafted, the only thing that they can say is, look, I almost don't care what you put in 181, but you can't have 1,600 different regulatory schemes across the state that somebody's gonna try to noodle through to figure out what the heck I gotta do.
I thought we were fighting for local control though. No, we're not?
It's not local control, are you kidding me? That-
Well, no.
I mean, they say that's in there, but
I mean,
this is not
No,
local
he's,
control.
because he knows I would be generally a local control kind of guy.
Well, no.
No, we have- I mean,
We have talked
seriously,
about,
this
we
is-
would like to have more local, I would like to have more
We-
local control, but I.
I'm not saying it's
agree,
better.
Opening it up that broad.
But yeah,
is
I feel like it-
problematic.
but there
I
is-
see
It
some
moves
good
the
things
fight
in
to
this.
every town hall,
Yeah.
that's what it kinda feels like,
Yeah.
you know,
They just pass the burden on to us.
yeah.
And I saw some, I read the bill today, I haven't seen the amendments, but you said they really
Well,
didn't change
which
it.
bill? Because if you read the
Senate.
Reed and Gross,
This is why we should be talking.
if you saw the Reed and Gross bill, then it has all the
It's
amendments.
time to read.
I didn't read all the amendments from the
The
Senate.
bill they passed in the
Yeah.
Senate, if
Yeah.
that's the one you downloaded, Reed and Gross,
Yeah.
it has all the amendments in it.
Okay, okay.
So at what point do we, I mean,
Yeah. is it
every
fun?
time the state government passes something, some of the folks
Well,
on the board don't like, how are we gonna be doing this all year, every time they do something you don't
Well, I
like?
think we're in different times. We've never seen the state enact things under this kind of realm. It almost feels like pushing things down. I mean, and that's why you're seeing so many of these letters come out. So I don't think I think this is something new. It's on uncharted times. You're hearing from everybody. Even CML sent out a letter how they're not giving enough time, how they're barely an hour before the bill passes that, then they finally get out the information to everybody to have to make decisions on. So a lot of people feel there's the right process. It's not happening down there right now.
I feel like we have enough business for me to keep busy, keeping up on top of family and career, to then have to go out, to go out and look at SB 121 and really have to break it down to the level to have this debate. Well, I'll be honest, I haven't done it.
I haven't read it.
And I'll tell this point that this, we're not quite big enough in Windsor, but kind of the next tier up would be to have a legislative staff, at least some person who, a good part of the legislature kind of keeps up with that, writes members to the board, breaks it
Well,
down.
but that's why we're members of CML, but right now, there's a lot of people who actually are feeling like even CML is not really doing their job right now.
Right,
I
well,
mean, for us on this, and this is one item where we all came together, I mean, from across the state to defeat 112, and I think that's the other piece of this piece of legislation. It kind of feels like it's, again, now a turnaround slap in the face for a lot of those folks that did we just go through this process? Didn't we just make some certain determinations, and now we have to spend all this time and energy again? Yeah, why do we have to spend this time and energy again? So, it's a conversation that its effects are gonna affect, I mean, they'll affect us here. It's not like it's just gonna affect Denver or big, I mean, this is something that affects all of us.
It'll affect us more than.
well, I would think
And-
Will
and
County
even
more
more.
than anywhere else.
Yeah, and we're gonna feel it even more, so we should be concerned about these kinds of things that are happening and trends.
So I think that's the interesting tension, and something I've always talked about is we all represent, other than you, we represent districts. And if we look back at the districts and people who elected us, are we representative of their preferences and priorities? Or at the end of the day, do we say what is good for Windsor? And one could argue, of course, anything that at least significantly negatively impacts the oil and gas industry will not be good for Windsor. Now, will 181 significantly impact the oil and gas industry? It feels like it will. Is that gonna be bad for Windsor? Yeah, it will. I mean, we went to lunch over at a Mexican restaurant over here at 11:30 one afternoon during the week, and there were probably 15 white pickup trucks in the parking lot. And they're all there, and they're all having lunch, and at, 1:15, they all went out, and they all got in their, logo-free white pickup trucks, and they drove away. Well, these guys won't be there. So is there gonna be an impact on house prices, economy in Windsor? Yeah, I think there is.
Well, and I think we saw, the voting, the matrix, the way it shook out, Weld County overwhelmingly said no to 112, overwhelmingly.
I'm not in Weld County.
But David, there's tons of issues, like we didn't take a position on the library, there was 2 bonds last year, I mean, all these things impact Windsor, where do we draw this line?
But those folks didn't come to us asking us, I never saw anything, nobody ever sent me anything. These folks have sent letters saying, will you sign on?
So who wrote this one? Do we know?
181?
This letter?
Came from Chris McGowan,
Who's that?
who's
I thought it was well written.
been in front of, he actually spoke in front of us before. I don't remember what his,
Chris?
Chris McGowan there.
yeah.
I guess.
Is he the same guy who wanted 74 to pass?
74?
No,
Is he 74 right?
I don't know, some guy got up and he spoke against 112, but he spoke for 74.
Yeah,
Really?
who was that?
I forgot his name, he's from Severance.
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's not this guy.
Okay. Well, we could debate the merits of the bill. That's
I
fine.
could never read it.
There's some
When
things
did that
that are
stop you?
good.
Huh?
When does that stop?
You know,
Oh, no, I think the hard part.
But that's not really our question. The question is, do we sign a joint letter as a board? That was the question, right?
I was concerned for the economic impact of Windsor, and I think, Mayor, and unfortunately, part of this is hard for all of us. They kind of pull over, it makes us take the stance on an issue that is gonna be significant to Windsor. If I felt it would have any,
Oh.
they passed the bill in the dead of night
I know.
during
I know.
the blizzard.
What they're trying to do now, though, is just,
It'll go. We could send 1 billion of these and they would go.
I know, it's, you're talking to an empty hand. But I was asked to say, hey, would your board sign this
I
as
have a
well?
question. Is there anything stopping people from signing these individually or collectively, 3 or 4 board members, or is there any legal?
Well, as it's drafted here, it's a resolution, so
Right.
that would be, legislative action.
No.
If you wanted to draft your own individual letters of support or
And I could say
disagreement,
as town board
I don't see why
member.
that's a problem.
Mhm.
And I could say it, board member, Windsor, Colorado, whatever.
I don't,
But
I don't
suppose
think
you'd
that would
have
be a
to
problem.
I thought Ian was getting,
Well,
said
you'd have to
something
say,
slowly about that.
I am a board member, but in my own
Yeah, in your
opinion, or this is
individual
my
capacity.
own
I'm not
opinion,
speaking.
not on
on
But I wouldn't
behalf
use,
of the
you can't
board.
use town letterhead, or, but you could, I think you could sign it as one person.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if it's not on town letterhead, if you said, I'm the Windsor Town Board, but I'm expressing my own opinion here, I think if you put those caveats in, and unless the board had a written policy that said, we don't do this, I think you should.
Well, you did that on next door, didn't you? The library.
Right.
You said
We
I'm a
did that on
town board
library.
member, but this is my own opinion, not,
Yeah.
Right.
I don't speak
We
for
don't
the
do that.
board. And I think
Mhm.
that's the way it can be phrased, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
support or
Because
fight
if the
something.
board was speaking together,
I've done
you'd
that
sign
in
the
a few
resolution.
places.
Yeah,
National
if
popular
there's a-
vote.
Yeah, that's a board resolution, it's different than an individual letter, expressing my opinion, right? Shouldn't be unified who we are, but, my concern, looking at the town, as I read it, we would have a really broad set of conditions that we could say yes and no to. Soil, air, water, light, sound.
Nuisance, noise.
Scenery.
Nuisance, right, scenery, and I definitely want more local control, I think we should have more, but the scope of that is so immense. I wonder what kind of technical staff we would need to manage that.
Well, and kind of to David's
That's one point,
point,
and then there's a whole bunch of other things too, that what happens when we say no?
well, and when Ian and I talked about this, we thought, if this does move forward, one, I hope that there's some kind of phased in, I hope there's 6 months or some amount of time
How we
to
figure-
wrap your head around it, and I hope
Right.
there's some time to engage the other municipalities, at least in the area, and say, look, is there a reason to sit down and talk about this and see if there's a common regulatory scheme, so you don't have you know, all these different jurisdictions and, you know.
Just put them on our borders.
That's good.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, I think it was just like, you know, why have 225 sets of rules or whatever for
Right.
all the municipalities? I mean, is there a way to really
Yeah.
at least talk to the adjacent communities and see if there's a regulatory scheme or something that every community would apply? That's not to say that there wouldn't be localization, but there could be, you know, because it would seem a little bit unwieldy. Especially going it alone, just Windsor, just applying
Oh,
this,
yeah.
is gonna be,
So I've tried to move, because I think it's gonna pass, something similar to it's gonna pass, so I'm
Oh, yes.
trying to figure out how we're gonna manage.
Well, there's gonna be litigation.
Yeah.
There's gonna be lots of litigation.
There will be, but in the
everywhere.
meantime, there won't be,
Everybody's hands are
there won't
gonna
be
be
a
tied
permit
in
issue
litigation.
in the state. So,
There'll
great.
still be a
For 2
commission,
years,
but
for 2 years,
the
it's in
makeup
court.
is very different. And did I read it that they had to get permits from like 5 or 6 other, like the
Air quality,
the water
water
quality, the
quality.
wildlife?
Yeah.
Okay, they have to get approval
I
from each
don't
of
know if
those
it's permits
first?
specifically, but it gives those agencies the authority to regulate, where it used to be preempted by COGCC
That's what I
entirely.
thought, that's the way I read it.
Now it's COGCC, 5 other state agencies, every local
And is
municipality.
that before they come to the local?
They have to go to local first.
They go to the local first, so it's back on us.
And
It's a lot of
in fact,
action.
the current preemption rule in the bill, it used to say, if there's a conflict between a local rule or a state agency or COGCC or the county, the most restrictive controls.
Most
But
restrictive.
if it's local control, why can't Weld, Greeley, and Windsor create a easy environment for these things to flourish? So why is that?
No, they can't,
They can't.
because.
So there's not
because
local control.
It is local control, but if there's a conflict between local control or state control or other control, it used to say the most restrictive of the control. So if COGCC comes out with more restrictive for the air and gas, air quality, it won't matter what we say.
If it really was about protections, they would have just come up with some protective clauses. This really is about killing the industry.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean,
The only way I think it does is if you set up enough regulatory hurdles, they'll go to Texas Permian
Yeah.
Basin and have a well in 2 days.
They'll
Why am I gonna
leave,
dig
they'll leave
around
the
in
state.
Colorado?
Except the
They'll
oil's
be out
here,
of the
except
state.
there's oil here, I mean,
Well, there is oil there.
yeah, I mean, they'll still.
But I can get
figure
it
out.
cheaper, quicker, and easier.
Right.
Then why aren't they doing that now?
Or
Who
something.
wants to live in a Permian basin?
they'll still be here.
Oh,
Right.
They'll still be here. I mean,
maybe that's why.
I don't know.
Huh?
Not,
Maybe
not
that's
the
why
new
it's
one, no, they won't.
going.
So yeah, I think we need to, we'll have to try to figure out how we're gonna manage. And I don't know the law, I mean, obviously there'll be lawsuits, but does that happen? I mean, does everything just go on hold until the lawsuits are settled, like it does with NISP, or, I don't know.
What it says currently is that the commissioner, the director of the COGCC, until all of the new regulations are
You know,
adopted by the
sometimes I didn't understand it
COGCC,
though.
the director can refuse to issue a permit if he or she feels that there's an issue with respect to local control concerns, or not adequate attention has been given to public health, safety, welfare, and the safety of the environment and animals.
How does that
Which,
play out?
to my mind, I mean, you could cite that any time you want.
Oh, yeah.
So it kind of feels like there's essentially a moratorium until the new
There
regulations.
is.
That's kind of, I thought it'd probably be a moratorium.
Well, there, somewhere it
Does it say
says,
the word?
there it does say something about 3 years, a 3-year moratorium.
Yeah, I think so. I don't recall seeing that.
Well, I read
It was in the
that.
right direction.
I think people have read that and said, because it says until the final regulations are adopted, which they estimate to be 2 to 3 years, the director of COGCC
I
can
thought
refuse.
in one of
It
those,
doesn't have to.
there was it actually called out 3 years.
No, I would have highlighted that in red.
But you guys saying like they're gonna leave or new ones aren't gonna come in, that's your opinion, you don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know that.
And so,
We don't know.
I'm not gonna sign
But
it,
it's-
so are we having a meaningless conversation? You guys can go sign it personally if you'd like.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, with the response that I heard back, basically this side of the table, these 4 gentlemen said they wouldn't sign it, or didn't think we should do it, and, Paul and David said yes, so it's,
It's not a resolution.
It's not a
Not that we
resolution.
take it.
Well, I don't even think it was a resolution that I sent them.
No, that
This
was.
was just a letter.
the
It was just,
other
it was
one.
just a letter.
Just
MPO.
Yeah, it was just a letter.
I do agree with those issues. That was in detail.
bugs are in the weeds.
Bugs are in the
Very
weeds, I like that
concerning.
better, I like that better.
Snakes,
Very.
snakes, snakes.
Anything about new future meetings?
Yes, Mayor, so, it's not on your copy, I'm sorry, because I updated this on Friday after the packet has gone out. But we are going to have, the much anticipated projected residential build-out based on existing land use conversation on May 20th.
I forget that one.
And
On
then,
May 20th?
yes,
Oh,
May 20th.
and then, we will,
okay.
and then we will follow up and have a Windsor water strategy discussion on June 3rd. 'Cause I think these things really inform each other. And so, we've had a lot of good, meetings with engineering and planning and water, and really looking at these maps and, talking about future strategies for open space, and there's just some really good conversation to have with the board. So, anyway, those will be kind of May and June, and so we're basically booked up through, June 3rd right now.
I'm sorry, the June 3rd was the water?
Yes, sir.
June 3rd is water.
And
So we have
it'll-
those filled in is basically, here they weren't filled in, but now they are.
Right, yeah, and again, I'm sorry, these just kind of came together on Friday, so it was after the packet went out.
You got the knockoff, that's the problem.
Do I have to buy the Apple thing?
You don't have to.
He couldn't, you wouldn't spring the $100.
No.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I had one other announcement, and this is,
This thing is worthless.
you know, I figured this is gonna restart our last conversation, but, I got this note kind of end of the day today from, Chief. He said that Sinclair will be releasing nitrogen gas at the facility near County Road 13 in New Liberty. They advise it is not dangerous, but it is very loud. They will start at midnight or 1, and will go to two or 3 hours.
Who is
Why don't they do it during the day?
Sure. I'm sorry, and I forwarded this to Scott and to Ian. Ian's out, I'm like, I don't think we have any regulatory thing here, but I'm certain that our residents in steeplechase are gonna be.
They just don't get it, I mean, why?
Yeah, and they didn't do a press release, they just called dispatch and just said, so you know, if you hear a loud noise.
Who's doing this?
Sinclair.
When, what day?
Tonight.
Tonight, sweet.
Yeah, so we did put something out on social
Gotta take the
media.
phone off the hook.
Really?
Really?
So I'll definitely get called, like, so that happened, what's that new, well, I can, there's probably, I can think of, if steeplechasers look up, they're very vocal, but, usually they Karen Speed or Del Egan from High Point Estates. But I got a call one night, I was driving from Estes, and I was coming through Loveland, and Merlin was having this huge loud sound at somebody's house, I'm like, look, I'm driving down Highway 34, where is it at? So they sent me the location, I drove over there on my way home, like 9 at night, and I got there and there's nothing going on. But they said it's just this huge loud sound was coming out of there, I just missed it, right? I was like, well, I don't know, I sent a call to COGCC, or, you know, I didn't know where else to send them, there wasn't a whole lot I could do. But I wanted to, you know, when they said it was going on right now, I said, well, I'm coming that way, I'll turn up to County Road 13 and go check it out.
So you sent him earplugs that said vote Wilson?
No. Not in my
So-
district.
and
I did forward that to the whole town board. We did put something out on social media. We wanted to let people know.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know, to just, but again, there's no, they didn't call us to ask for permission or for a better time. It was just letting our dispatch know this is gonna happen tonight. So,
At least they let us
There's
know.
a ton of activity on County Road 13, just the oil and gas. Like sometimes the trucks can be 3 or 4 trucks deep, like the buses with workers. Those sandboxes, I don't know what's going on. Those, well, they have those 2 sandboxes per flatbed. Those are just going in and out
They
constantly.
bus in workers, is that?
Yeah, they have, Liberty, it says Liberty Oilfield Services.
Yeah.
Those
Less
are
traffic.
black and maroon. Yeah, they have like their own buses.
Well, Halliburton, when they
Jobs.
make sure all of their people,
Oh, yeah.
they have to
Come on.
truck them
I
in.
forgot what I'm talking about, that's a
Um,
van or whatever.
I think